Okay. I have 5 o'clock. Okay. We're going to call our study session to order, and we're going to begin with roll call.
Stu Boyd.
Here.
Amy Doran.
Here.
Pam Howard.
Here.
Dawn Kirk.
Here.
Barbara Cruz.
Here.
Alexandra Lessem.
Here.
Nancy Rumfeld.
Here. And we're going to have Stu, before everybody starts to eat, I guess, lead us in the pledge.
Okay.
And the flag is right over there.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're not going to do the mission. All right, and we also need to approve our agenda for this evening, so if there aren't any changes or corrections, I'd take a motion to approve the agenda. So moved. Second. Laura Lee, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Stu Boyd.
Aye.
Amy Doran.
Aye.
Pam Howard.
Aye.
Dawn Kirk.
Aye.
Barbara Cruz.
Aye.
Alexandra Lessem.
Aye.
Nancy Rumfeld.
Aye. Okay. Thank you. We get to start out our evening with our school presentation. So we're going to begin with Garfield. This is fun to be in the environment.
Right? Really, welcome to Garfield. I'm trying to do this with you here. So I'm going to apologize to all of you because I think we're sort of presenting here. This is spin around. Try to be everywhere and know at the same time.
Spin around.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Schaefer, welcome to Garfield. This is a unique opportunity I've been excited about. Slightly nervous, but excited. It's a beautiful school. I'm glad to host you in it, and I'm proud to be able to stand here with Laura Bess, our arts coordinator, to share with you why we're an arts integration school and why we are the school that we are. And so we're here today to share some of that with you. Okay? And as we go through the slides, it's student work that backs each of them. I would also invite you, if you take a break during today's session at all, just take a quick walk up and down some hallways. What you'll see is pretty incredible student work, student writing, student process, and it's worthwhile. So if you need to stretch your legs, go out there and do it. You'll thank yourself later. All right?
So we just want to, I was thinking about this and I thought, I just want you to see the cute little faces of the people of our school, because we need to bring students with us. Thank God I'm looking at this room. So I just made a little movie trailer for you to see their cute faces and give you a little glimpse at Garfield.
Very good. Cute. Yeah, it was fun.
So arts integration, it's a program we've had at this school, adopted in 2007. We've had it since then, and it's what I want you to understand about it, it's not just something we do, it's something we believe. It filters through everything that we do in this school. It's a part of, as you as a board consider things like curriculum adoptions. Garfield's going to look at that curriculum and say, okay, how can we do that curriculum? How can we do that amazing thing through the arts? It's how we attract people from outside our district to come to the school. It's how we try to steal from inside the district. The Michael work, looking at your kids. We're going to take them too. I'm just kidding. But it's everywhere. It's how we engage. It's how we find joy. It's how we teach. It's what I want to do as a leader every day that I come in here. All of our principals do a very similar job, but mine is unique and different because of the lens that we have. I wanted to share a quick story with you. So those pictures up there define a vision. So Explore, Express, and Excel are the center of our mission as a school. They've been on that mission statement for longer than I've been in Thompson and much further beyond. But the vision hadn't quite changed until 2017, when a student of ours gave me that picture in the bottom right-hand corner. And it's a picture of a grizzly bear breaking through a piece of paper. And she said, Mr. Cliver, I wanted to have this. And it wasn't anything big or spectacular. It was just, I made this for you, please enjoy it. And so I put it on my desk. And then when I looked at it, I thought, I love it. Why do I love this so much? You know, it's a grizzly bear. Yay, grizzlies, we're grizzlies, okay. But it was this grizzly bear breaking through. And I finally got the title of it, the title of the piece was Garfield Unleashed. And I thought, that's a vision. So we made that our vision that year, that we would step across obstacles, that we would not let anything stop us from being the students in the school that we wanted to be. And every year since, I've invited students and staff to come up with that next vision. And so every year it's student work or even teacher work that drives the vision. And we build our entire school year, everything that we do through those words. And you're standing in the year of Garfield Empowered. And this year we are empowered to be creative. And we're empowering students to take risks. And we're empowering staff, even better, to take risks and try things they've never tried, to get outcomes and pieces of work that they've never had. So that's how it drives us.
So when you think about arts integration, there's really 5 components of arts integration. That's visual arts, music, movement, drama, and technology. And we work with our teachers to really put all of those things within a unit of study. And really this year with the Garfield Empowered, we're really trying to empower our teachers too, to do process over product and really give kids the ownership of their learning and driving their own thinking and creativity and using critical thinking skills to get those things done. And we've been seeing amazing things. I think if you walk around our school, you'll probably see that too. The next one.
Yep, that's me. So student engagement is one of the main topics you'll see in our school's UIP, and it's lived in that UIP, our Unified Improvement Plan, for the last 5 years. We just wholeheartedly believe that kids who find joy and want to do and be at school will do better, right? That's a pretty obvious thing to say. But we use arts integration to drive that engagement and what they're doing in class, and that they all have voice and choice in what they're creating. And I wanted to share with you some different pieces of data today in my presentation. This particular piece of data comes from Bloom Sites, which is a survey data that we give our students every 3 or 4 weeks to kind of gauge how they're feeling about school. And this particular piece of data came right from January, and it talks about engagement. And the questions are, do you want to be in school? Are you participating in your work the way that you should be and the way your teacher is asking you to? Do you have choice in the products that you're creating? And Garfield students, over 90%, said, yeah, we do. They recognize in their own school and their own learning that engagement piece that's important to us.
So I love this little video. This is really our staff participating in a professional development on a Wednesday. And one of John and I, when we came back from COVID and through all COVID, we just didn't feel great about being at school. I think most teachers in this room would probably agree with that. It was terrible. And so, we had a low morale. Our kids didn't really know what was going on. They'd been at home, and it was a big shift for everybody. So John and I we really worked on happy staff, because a happy staff makes happy students and happy people. So we hold professional development for our staff once a month for Lisa type things, and giving teachers the tools that they need to engage their students with the arts. We give them opportunities to be creative and critical thinkers themselves, which is also fun for them. And it makes teaching fun when you get to do fun things in their classrooms. And I think that really we have a great climate and culture committee at our school, and we do really ridiculous and fun things every month. And I think that shows in our teachers and our staff. It's just a happy place to be. And I think most people walk in and say, wow, it feels good in here. And it does feel good in here. It feels good in here to work here every day. So.
And with that same note, I brought another piece of data just about that staff engagement piece. And this comes from the TLCC survey that's taken every couple years across Colorado. And what I'm looking for is not just a staff who enjoys being at our school, right? It's great to come to school and have the joy and the fun that we do, but they also understand the work and agree with the work, that they're a part of it. And so this was a particular piece of data I keyed in on this year, that 100% of staff agree that they are in on know about and have active engagement with our UIP. And for me, that means the world, because we've defined things in there that matter. And we've defined things in there that are the real work changing kids and what they do. And they're just a phenomenal group of people. If I had them here, I would stop and introduce each and applaud them because they're just remarkable.
I think that one of our other great engagement activities is having our community members in our school. We have guest artists that come into our building and work in classrooms and help teachers with their lessons. We have residents, artists in residence that come and do drama club or band or different things that give our students different opportunities. Many of our students have really not been past Walmart on 34, and that's not a joke. We want to expose them to amazing things and bring amazing programs into our school, and we want our community to know what we're doing here and be involved. So we have several artists that they ask to come, can I come and help you do things? And absolutely, we want you to come and enjoy our school. So I think that's really important that we have the community supporting our school too. And we're constantly using the community to help us do fundraising activities too, silent auctions and things like that to raise money for our LISA program.
Speaking of more just on the community side, from my lens as a principal, the Garfield community is one that loves its schools. They're here. We have one bus that comes every other person's dropping off kids in a car or standing on that blacktop. They want to be here. They want to talk to us. They greet us at doors, and it's just a phenomenal feel. And what we want for our kids is that they're in the premier arts integration school, not only in the state but in the nation. We aim to be a school that is represented at conferences. We aim to be a school that others look to find out why are you getting the results you're getting. It's not just arts magnet. It's arts integration. It's a part of everything. And I want to close out on my end before I let Laura close on hers, is that idea of premier school in Colorado. And so I get here's a moment in front of you, the board. How can you help us be that premier school in Colorado? You know, it's not a funding ask, but it's one of our struggles is in the last couple of years we've continued to see a decline in the budget that supports the program and that makes it amazing. So we're getting creative, Artsonia and some fundraisers and trying to build back up. We're seeking grants and doing an amazing job. I would give a shout out to, help me, our district arts coordinator.
Oh, Nicole Keene.
Thank you, Nicole. She stepped in this year and is already giving us great ideas and great, insight as how to sustain the programming that we have so we don't lose a single thing. So we want to do that, and we're just going to continue to address those challenges and go out and see other schools. Later this spring, we're going to go see some arts integration schools in Denver. We're looking for opportunities to bring professional development from outside our district to us so we can continue to grow and don't stagnate. But that's the direction we're going, and we would invite you into our school anytime. If you ever just need a break from wherever you're at, the joy in this place is palpable. Come see, come feel. It's outstanding.
Are you sure?
Yeah, careful what you wish
They would welcome you to come. So I just want to end on this slide, and this is my little buddy, Timmy, and I'm going to cry. You might have to do that.
I can't.
So Tim came to our school from preschool with, he has autism, and he was a disaster. He would sprawl on the floor, kicking and screaming. There was a one-on-one pair basically with him all day because he just was out of control. It was not good. But today, this little guy has really used arts integration to be able to express himself, to share his ideas and his thoughts, and empower him to be the best he can be. And now he's not in special ed. He is a typical student, typical peer in his classroom, and he's amazing. And he was in Arts Academy last night, and we're walking out. He goes, Miss Bess, this stuff is just awesome. And I thought, it is just awesome, and I'm so glad you enjoyed it. So I really feel like this really shows you what arts integration can do for a student. So. Garfield Power. My buddy Timmy.
What grade is he in there?
Yeah,
He's in second grade.
second grade now, just in 2 years, it's
Yeah.
turned
In 2
him
years,
around.
yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you guys very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, you guys. And now we will move to Namakwa. Namakwa was scheduled for our one that we ended up doing virtually, so that's why we have two schools here tonight.
Yeah. Just gotta get
That's
marked in
fine,
then.
and I have a lot of staff
Yes.
supporting us,
Sure
and
do.
staff helping me with our presentation tonight. All right, good evening, Madam President, Dr. Schaefer, and members of the board. First of all, we would like to, our entire school community would like to celebrate you as a board with it being School Board Appreciation Month. Our students have made you some cards. And we leave those with Coralie for you to have and look through. Thank you.
How sweet.
Yes. All 250 accepted back if they were in school today. So, yes. So my leadership team and I are so excited to share with you the work that we have been doing at Namakwa and our journey out of turnaround. We have had amazing growth and we're super excited to celebrate and share that with you. The demographics at Namakwa have changed a lot. Over the last 5 years, I've been at Namakwa for 4 years now. I moved from Stansbury when it closed over to Namakwa and welcomed the students from Van Buren when it closed to our school. We've had a lot of staff changes over the last 4 years, and due to these changes, we did recreate our mission and vision, and it is all about growth for our students. We even found some of us are wearing them, shirts on Amazon that happen to have our school mission on them, which we thought was pretty awesome. We also have a yearly school theme that we focus on professional growth on. And this year, it is about building excellence, not only in our students, but in ourselves too. We feel that there are many things that we did to help us get out of turnaround. And we are really going to focus on sharing 3 of those with you tonight. It is our work in PLCs, it is our small group instruction, and it is our focus on social emotional learning. My leadership team will be sharing about each of those, and I'm going to turn it over to them.
Hello.
Madam President.
Dr. Schaefer, members of the board. I am Autumn Anderson. I am an Namakwa's instructional coach and interventionist. This is my first year in PSD, and although professional learning communities are not new to me, having been an educator in surrounding districts for over the past decade, I can tell you Namakwa has set an example for others to follow. Our PLCs promote self-efficacy, they enhance performance and motivation by increasing efforts in both students and teachers. We continue to build this capacity by making our sessions a weekly priority. Together, we foster a community of reflective practices that mix both qualitative and quantitative data analysis. We rotate our topics to include literacy, math, SEL, walkthroughs, intervention cycles, but also give the teachers the power to choose where they need that support. This ensures they maintain balance and focus on our #1 driving force, the child. With constant resources fluctuating to an ebb and flow, our state standards drive our instruction. Together, not only do we deconstruct learning indicators, but strengthen our grading practices through leveled exemplars, rubrics, and student work samples. This, combined with instructional coaching cycles, has embedded a culture of lifelong learning and self-reflection. We will continue to push the status quo by leaning on current research-based implementation strategies and then making the voices of many our continued vision. Please let me introduce one of our 3rd grade teachers.
Hello, Madam President, Dr. Schaefer, members of the board. Thanks for having us tonight. I'm Tanny Burns, and I'm one of the 3rd grade teachers at Namakwa. I am very blessed to be part of this team. I've been with them for 4 years now. I was one of the first teachers that came in after Angie joined Namakwa, and we have had to come together over the last 4 years to overcome a lot of challenges. With new school, 2 schools joining each other with the closure of Van Buren, new staff, and then the COVID pandemic. We've faced many things, but our district vision has helped us keep the focus on the needs of each student and help recognize them as unique individuals with their specific needs regardless of their ability level. Knowing this, we worked hard to plan, implement, and then constantly improve on the work that we're doing with our students. And a large part of the growth that we've seen, we really attribute to the work we've done in small groups with them. While we know that working in large groups with students is a great way to teach, it doesn't meet their individual needs, and a lot of students need more targeted instruction. We've used our PD time to thoughtfully plan and incorporate the science of reading practices this year. And using that time to support students and then again revise every time it's needed. Our teachers use real-time data to assess student ability, group them based on their skill needs, and then regularly consider their achievement to decide what the next steps will be. We utilize materials and activities both in reading and math to target the gaps that they have and then build upon work that we're doing during that whole group class time. While we're meeting with students, the other students in class are participating in thoughtfully planned activities that are supporting their growth. Students engage in a wide variety of activities around the building, both with and without technology, individually or collaboratively, and even with other interventionists, staff members, volunteers that come in. On any given day, you may have students working on phonics activities, partner reading, playing math games, doing individualized iReady lessons, writing, research, and project-based learning. It's also a great time for us to connect with our students in that small group because it helps us build those relationships with kids and really help to see how they're growing when we have time to focus on a smaller group. With that in mind, our 5th grade team is going to share more about our social emotional learning time and how we're building those relationships.
Hi, I'm Kim, and I'm Kim. Kim squared, because Kim squared. So, Madam President, Dr. Schaefer, and the board, we're going to address the social emotional aspect of our school and how important that has been to the growth of our students. Social emotional learning, or SEL, is an important priority in our school. Not only do we dedicate the first part of every day to SEL for our students, Angie dedicates time within our staff meetings to check with each and every one of us and to check with each other. Learning social emotional strategies within our staff meetings is important in at least 3 ways. Angie allows staff to experience the new strategies and ideas to help us feel connected to each other and to understand the importance of incorporating SEL strategies in our classrooms. It also gives us a universal language to use within the building. It gives us tools that help create the connectivity within our staff so we feel more comfortable to ask each other questions and to take risks to grow. This trickles down to our students. It helps us understand the importance of integrating SEL into our lessons, thus helping our students feel connected to us, each other, and creating a confident learning community.
And I'm just going to talk about what we do in our classrooms. We start every day by checking in with our students and dedicating at least 20 minutes to social emotional learning through second step lessons, circles, think, pair, share. We integrate SEL within our academic lessons across the curriculum by asking students thought-provoking questions tied to our learning across all curriculum areas. We integrate Kagan strategies and reiterate our expectations when working together in whole group, small group, or individually. Our SEL specialists also meet with our students at least every other week and sometimes daily. We analyze the Bloom site data and make adjustments to our positive behavior supports within our PLCs meetings so that our students are feeling safe, secure, and confident at school, thus building a stronger and more supportive learning community. After all, it's important for both teachers and students to feel safe, heard, confident, and excited to try new things, understanding that mistakes are expected and respected, and learning from each other is really what school is all about, and is one reason our students are growing at Namaqua. Thank you.
going to wrap this up for us. So as Dr. Schaefer shared with me today, I'm always a little competitive in always wanting to grow and do the next best thing, which is a good trait to have as a leader of a building. So our next steps as we think about next year is really continuing to integrate those STRIVE science of reading strategies within our whole group and small group. Really building on, we've revamped our whole PBIS with our new staff and everything, and so really building on that and pulling in some more restorative practices. And then whatever math program you guys choose to adopt in the coming month, we will be implementing that and really working on our math instruction. And then really looking at writing and getting more aligned across our building and writing. So as a staff, I'm going to read a lot of this because I want to make sure, I don't want to get too emotional about it because I'm super excited about what I'm going to share with you guys right now, and I want to make sure I get it right. So since I've been at Namakwa, I have been waiting for 4 years for CMAS data to show our progress. And before the pandemic, we were in turnaround. Our achievement was average. Our growth does not meet state expectations. We really focused on ensuring over the last 3 years that each of our students is growing. And our growth went from does not meet to exceeds state expectations. We went from an overall performance of 43.2 to a 77.9.
Wow.
So we almost doubled it. Our iReady data right now for mid-year is showing even more growth than we had last year. And I actually shared this news with Dr. Schaefer. I was doing some research last night for this presentation and discovered that our school, my staff does not do this.
You had to find it yourself.
I did, and I stumbled across it. Just because I was researching for tonight and I wanted to make sure I had all my numbers right. We will be awarded the Governor's Distinguished Improvement Award as a school. Has ever received in this capacity since it's been established in 50 years. So we are super proud of our accomplishments and that we continue to build excellence for each of our students.
Awesome. I have to share with you and the staff that I was part of that first teaching staff at Namakwa 50 years ago.
When I closed Stansberry,
I have been there
too. Yes, in my final year there, we received the John Irwin Award.
It is an extraordinary achievement to the staff, to the leadership, to the students. That is a big deal. And they are really close to, they're one of our highest, if not one of the highest performing schools in our entire school district, and super close to hitting that distinguished level. So certainly one of the top performing elementary schools in the state of Colorado, and to get that award, I mean, and again, in 3 or 4 short years, is nothing short of phenomenal.
Yeah.
So.
Yay.
I just wondered, so do you have the ability to like figure out how you made your secret sauce? So you can send it to all the
That
other
was
schools?
part of our
I
conversation
talked to-
today when they were walking through the building, and some of the things that we shared tonight, I feel like are a big piece of what we did.
It's phenomenal.
Yep, I mean, there are many other things, but those were the 3 big things that we did in the last 4 years.
Thank you, and congratulations. What a wonderful way to end
Friday to hear because I'm not tomorrow.
Thank you. As everybody leaves. It's okay.
They're finally gonna get to go home.
All right. That was wonderful. What a great way for us to work with our schools and consolidate them. Oh, yeah. All right, we're gonna keep going, and we're gonna move into our discussion items that we are gonna have a really in-depth conversation about to answer questions. I want to share with you how we're going to do it. We're going to do the round robin piece where somebody will ask one question, then it goes on to the next person and the next person, and we'll just keep going around, and we'll monitor, and I'll monitor kind of the starting point and the fact that we have 4 additional items that kind of fall within this area. So I'll kind of monitor the timing of where we are, and I'll check in with staff, with board members to see if we're going to continue in this fashion or if we are going to have questions submitted in writing. If we don't get to all the questions, the last few be submitted in writing, and then they'll be posted onto our
Board minutes.
thank you, our board minutes. So we will begin with our discussion on the math curriculum and just an update and an opportunity for questions. So anything you guys want to share before we ask our questions?
Well, I just wanted to say, Madam President, Dr. Schaefer, member of the board, thank you for having us back to discuss further our recommendations for math curriculum. So I have Shannon, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, here with me, and so we're here to answer what we can.
I'm going to ask you that as you ask your question, you project, because those are our microphones right there. So everybody, in order for them to be able to gather it, we need to kind of project a little bit. Okay? And I think I'll start. Don, do you have any questions on it? Okay. Amy? No? Stu?
I do.
Okay.
On the decision-making scoring guide program comparison slide, that's a long name for a slide. Are you able to put that up, Laura Lee?
Yes. Is that the name of it?
That's the name at the top of the slide. Decision-making scoring guide program comparison. And it was a ways.
It wasn't is that an
Slide, I
attachment?
think it was an attachment.
I can find it.
You know, while she searches for that, I can ask you the question, I think. On that slide, there are 7 sets of numbers. 6 of them jibe with each other, the 7th doesn't, and the one that doesn't is the collaboration numbers. Do you know, or can you speculate on the reason that the teachers don't like the way Envision addresses or promotes collaboration nearly as well as what iReady does? That's the first part of this question.
I just want to make sure, Stu, that I'm looking at the right one, and
I think it's the teacher perception input. It's page 4
yeah.
of the comparison scoring guide.
Okay, I don't have the paper copy.
So was it student collaboration?
No, it's the teacher perception.
It's teacher perception.
On,
Yep.
oh, back up on 4 maybe. Yeah, there we go.
I think it might
so-
be the same question I asked.
So the feedback that we had received was really that, with learning both programs, it's difficult to know when you're first learning the program where those collaborative spaces are within materials, because you're just kind of learning the lay of the land with that. And so, we had some teachers who really felt like that wasn't built in as much into Envision, whereas we had other teachers who felt like it was, and some of the comments kind of refer to that. The other piece is that within iReady, there was, it seems like, again, through some of the feedback, a little bit more of a comfort level with that because they have been using iReady instruction as well, and so a little bit more comfort possibly with the platform. Again, I wasn't using that, so I'm not, I can't give you a firsthand account of that. But based on that feedback, that's something that we've really made note of, that we need to ensure that we spend time moving forward on how do we really elevate that within the program to ensure that those opportunities that are either built into Envision or that we need to build in are really part of the professional learning that teachers get, so that way students really are collaborating, which was one of the elevated core
values that they wanted to make sure was included.
All right. Just a follow-up comment. I noticed going through the slides that the kids found Envision both more engaging and collaborative. And so I wondered how important is the teacher collaboration number in terms of the whole scheme of the data?
I would say each point was a piece. And so, you know, we wanted to validate everybody's input into that. And so, yes, students actually rated Envision's collaboration higher. And so that's included in the data, and teachers rated it a little bit lower, and so that's included. So we didn't want to elevate anything higher than or eliminate any of those pieces. So all of those pieces reflect in the numbers for that reason.
All right. And so there are ways to perhaps implement some of the iReady collaboration strategies into Envision?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Pam?
I just wanted to touch base on the usage, the regional usage. So it says limited local usage for iReady and or no evidence of achievement or growth. And then for Envision, local use, it's rated local usage and positive achievement and growth. Could you just dive into that a little bit more for me? And I'm trying to remember who uses each of the curriculums locally or regionally, I should say.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
So iReady, the comprehensive materials of iReady. iReady is not a new program,
Right.
but the comprehensive program is fairly new. And so the regional usage and local usage is limited at this time because it is so new. And so we don't have any trend data or any local districts that are using it district-wide to be able to kind of follow that trend yet. Whereas with Envision, we have, since I think it's 2017 on that slide, we have Pooter and St. Vrain who are using it district-wide, and so we have compelling trend data to really look at here's what happens for districts who are using it consistently over a longer period.
Thanks. That's exactly what I was wanting to hear. Thanks.
Alexandra?
I guess my biggest question is, did you feel like as far as input from various stakeholders, did you get adequate response? You know, if there were 100 people who used it, did you hear back from at least, 70+% of them, or did you hear back from 2? Or, as far as that goes?
Yes, so as far as the teacher input, we had 74 teachers who trialed, and we had survey data with 55 of them, and then follow-up conversations with 11 of them. And so students, we talked to as many of them as we could, but we had to kind of vary that a little, based on some of them are kindergartners and some of them are 5th graders, and so that has to vary a little bit, but every classroom was visited that trialed, and so students within every classroom were talked to and interviewed and had conversations, maybe not every single student, but students within every classroom.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy?
So I had sent you some questions, I think Monday or something. One of the things I noticed when reading all of this, the way it came across and it was presented, the report kind of seemed skewed towards Envision in that there was no cost for iReady. Appendix E and F was only Envision, no iReady. So for me, it makes it a little bit difficult when I'm reading through this, especially with some of the teacher to understand why are we leaning towards Envision, because I get it, iReady's relatively new, but it's a system that we already use and it's showing great results. Is there a reason, how quickly, or is there a reason why we have to make a decision now to switch? Is there something driving that? Is there a timeline, a deadline, instead of us being allowed to look more at iReady? Like what?
Well, as far as the timeline and the deadline goes, we spent really the first semester really, using these materials and getting feedback and engaging with it. And we want to ensure that if we are making a change with materials, that we have plenty of time to not only receive the materials, but offer training, so teachers have the, runway to really learn and plan and be ready when students come back. And so when we think about timelines and deadlines, there's no set date that X must be done by, in policy or anything like that. However, knowing that anything that we move toward is going to involve brand new materials, shipments, putting things in people's hands, and training, that's really the hope to move whatever decision forward, so we can ensure that people have what they need to really hit the ground running next year.
So I guess I'm not certain that you answered. So is there a reason that we have to decide now to switch? I mean,
So
why can't we wait and do another semester of looking at it to ensure it's the right? Because it's very disruptive for teachers and students to switch.
So our current materials, and Shannon can add to this, go out of production after this year.
Could you speak up, please?
I'm so sorry. The current materials go out of production after this year.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't understand that. Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
now I understand. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a.
So we can't order anymore. Yeah, I apologize, I didn't understand, that was the question.
Yeah, but that wasn't it, so now it makes sense why we, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would just add that generally when they are making a decision about a curriculum, they only price out the one that we need to have the price on, so we know. It's not necessarily done by, we're gonna buy this program because it's cheaper than the other one. They price out the one that has scored the highest. So that's why when our report came, we only had Envision as what we were seeing.
But it's still our decision to pick the curriculum.
It is based on their recommendation. We didn't do the piloting. Question. Dawn, anything more? Amy? No?
I do.
Okay.
So Shannon, am I correct that we currently use iReady to assess elementary math performance? That's the assessment that we currently use?
That's our diagnostic assessment, yes.
Yes. So here's my question, then doesn't it follow that if the kids are using iReady math curriculum, or if they were using iReady math curriculum, that they would probably be better prepared for an iReady assessment? Does my question make sense?
It does, and I don't think that we have that correlation yet because
Okay.
the program hasn't been around long enough to really show whether or not that would be the case. We do also use iReady instruction, and so that's some instructional materials that can be used based on the diagnostic if there are some gaps to fill with for both reading and math. That are very targeted at certain skills, but not a holistic program. So that is happening as well, and probably would continue to be an option for teachers to use.
So my point is, and I'll just end really quickly, the assessment may test what their curriculum contains, not necessarily what the kids should know. And that was, when I read this, was kind of a red flag to me about an iReady curriculum and an iReady assessment. Are we really testing and discovering what the kids should know? Or are we dealing with what the iReady curriculum prepares them to know? So, thank you, you answered my question.
So did you. Pam, anything else?
When's the last time we redid the math curriculum for elementary?
I think we're on 8 years.
I know, isn't it typically 7 is our?
We
kind of
try to 5-year cycle, 5 to 6 year.
I couldn't remember.
Yeah, as
I think we're 8 or 9 right
So
now.
we're really out there. That's why there won't be any materials next year.
Alexandra?
2014. It was 2014.
Yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Question, Alex, do you have one?
No.
Okay, Nancy?
I'm also curious about, I was reading in Envision that it includes the math diagnosis and intervention system, but that it also has this adaptive practice that's created for each student, which these two things to me suggest that their system is gathering and coalescing data about the student and their tests and as they progress so that it can adapt each new lesson plan for them or test. My question is the way that this contract will be written, is not only TSD the owner of the data, and no other third party not only will be sold any access, but also not granted any other access, because that's some of the things that they do.
Thanks for that. I may call on Kelly Sane behind me to help support our data privacy agreements that we have with all of our curriculum apps. We have a very strict one that we often have, anybody that we have those agreements with have to agree to ours. And Kelly has worked through that with many. I want you to know that iReady is our diagnostic assessment because per state regulations, we have some choices, and what we can use for Envision is not a diagnostic assessment, it's one of those choices. So iReady, no matter what materials in your curriculum that you choose across the state, many districts use iReady as a diagnostic assessment because that's where iReady's reputation really lies, is in their ability to provide that diagnostic data about students. Its reputation doesn't necessarily lie in the curriculum materials that it produces. This is a relatively new product that iReady has extended. So what I didn't want to have confusion about is that it's coincidental that we were looking at iReady as a curriculum material, and our diagnostic assessment is also called iReady. So our diagnostic assessment, if we adopt the Envision materials, is not going to be an Envision diagnostic assessment. So if we use Envision materials and there's any sort of curriculum application, meaning like a math game or something like that that kids can play on their iPads is connected with the Envision lesson that they're learning, anything that we use like that, and there are many that we use, they're strictly protected. And so I don't know if Kelly, you want to add anything like that to talk about DPA.
So each, whatever we work with as far as a vendor is concerned, they all have to sign a DPA. So that DPA is required that if we terminate contract, that they give us proof that they have stopped any data and that they have destroyed that data, and then we go forward without having to worry about where that data lies. So that's an option that we talk to them if we decide to terminate our contracts.
Does that agreement include that while they have access, they can't grant access to any other third party?
So each DPA has a process in place, and there are, as far as our concern is, they are not working with third party. Any third party stuff is deaggregated data if there is a third party collaboration. So there would not be any kind of selling of any data or anything like that.
And so it sounds like what you're saying is, even though the Envision package has this math diagnosis intervention system and it's included, we're not going to use it. Is that what you're saying?
Shannon talked about it. Sorry.
So that's basically all a moot point, what I first asked, right?
No, so that wouldn't be, we would continue using the iReady diagnostic as our check, right? Because that's being used consistently, it's being used K-8, and so we have that consistent check. Within Envision, there is a diagnostic, but what that would really do is just drive instruction. And so I could, say, okay, here's where my kids are, and it's going to be tied to the materials. And so then I can see within this unit, let's say, these students are going to need a little bit of extra help here, and these students are ready for more of a stretch or a reach. And so it's going to really be tied to units and classroom instruction, as opposed to the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. Yeah.
Actually, so I want to extend a little bit on one of Nancy's earlier questions, just about, so we have the two curricula were piloted, but there was work that predated the selection of these two. So understand that other vendors, other companies were considered and vetted. Do you want to talk a little bit about that process? So it's not really like an 18-week process, it's far longer.
Yeah, it's actually been about a year and a half. And so the process started by really just initially asking teacher leaders, what math programs do you know of? What are you hearing about? And that was how the first conversation happened, because they hear far more than we do. Oh, I heard this one. Oh, I've heard of this one. I know so-and-so's using this one. And then from there, those titles were run through ed reports, and you have more than you probably want in your packet about ed reports. And that is really the gatekeeping research-based company that really takes any programs that want to be elevated and runs it through an extensive process of, does it meet these requirements? So then from there, I believe there were 7 that came out as teachers had talked about them. They scored high in ed reports. Then those were given to teacher leaders, as well as representatives from Gifted and Talented, ESS, ELD, to say, put your eyes on these. Let's make sure that we're not missing something. And so there was a rubric that teacher leaders filled out and those representatives from the different groups. Then from there, there were 4 that were elevated to come in and have a training with teacher leaders on, to dig in a little bit deeper, because you can look through something, but until you have somebody that says, here's what it actually does. And so then from those 4, they went through a training, they filled out rubrics, they had conversations, and then they elevated these 2 as the ones that they wanted to trial.
Okay, questions? You're done? Okay. Nancy?
I just have one last one.
Okay.
I'm sure you guys are shocked. You guys said deep dive, and Nancy said okie dokie. So when I looked at the ed reports, it did show actually I already scored slightly higher than Envision. But my bigger thing is, and it's 6 emails from 6 teachers that I think we all got. But it was a little concerning as I was reading through them, and they were from different schools in different grades. But the general was, they didn't feel like all of the feedback they got access to all of the raw data. So there's a part of me that still feels a little hesitant in that. Is this really the right choice? Did we really get and hear all of from the teachers, not the teacher leaders, but the teachers who are the ones that, they're the ones that are going to be having to use it, whatever we go with. So that's just still my kind of lingering concern. I don't know if that's a question, I'm just letting you guys know.
Can you share maybe some of the work that was done as a result of maybe the teachers that did reach out, as well as maybe talk about the various opportunities that teachers had, both formally and informally, to provide input?
Sure. So as far as the opportunities for feedback went, there was a survey that went out to all trial teachers and all trial principals, and that was out there for just over a week, I believe. And then one of the questions on that survey asked if they wanted a follow-up conversation. And so then from there were teachers who said yes or no, and then a follow-up conversation happened based on that. And then when the email went out saying that this was what we were going to be bringing to the board, there was part of that said, and if you have any further questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out. We'll meet one-on-one. And so that was an opportunity as well. And then The teachers who most recently reached out, I have spoken to every one of them and made sure that I heard any concerns or questions that they had, and really have taken some notes about considerations for process moving forward to make sure that our communication is clear, and really just taking that feedback, and also what do we need to consider when implementing, like Stu was talking about with the collaboration piece, what do we need to know to make sure that when we implement, people are getting the best support that they need to really address any questions or concerns that came up.
Okay, so those teachers are basically, they're like okie dokie now, I mean, that you talk to.
As far as I know,
Okay.
the conversations went well.
Okay.
She followed up with it, that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so are we satisfied with our questions over the math, and we can put this down? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right.
Shannon, the process looked very thorough.
Thank you. We can always learn and improve.
English language arts coming soon.
All right, we've been through a few of those, haven't we, Stu? All right, item number 2 is the termination of agreement for use of the ditch water. Who's gonna sit down?
Yes, this feels more comfortable. Thank you, Madam President, Board of Education, and Dr. Schaefer. Tonight, I will briefly go through the presentation as we have discussed last board meeting, continuation of this. So this will be on for actual action consent next week if that's where we head. So just alignment with Strive 2025. Really what this is just a priority of our district resources and transparency and funds is where this motive came from to bring this up to this for discussion. Just a brief, this is really I think the agreement was attached to board docs. This really sums it up in 2 to 3 sentences of why it was put in place. The one purpose was to provide the owner with a pathway to deliver water. So TSD agreed to install from, which you see in the following slide, our current pump and holding tank to the property to the south. In exchange, then we could use some of the water rights. So without going through the 10 pages of legal, that was how the agreement started, and that's how, in essence, it was being put in place in the last 10 years. So this is the drawing of what, so that's the south end of the Turner track. The horizontal black line, that was kind of the current infrastructure that was there prior to the agreement. And the agreement said TSD basically install the water line going down to the property where those arrows are. And then we would install that and basically maintain the system in exchange for use of water rights. So moving forward, as we've been working on it this last several years, there's a few things with ditch water to note. So one is the district has enough water to maintain the site itself. The other piece of this is that the ditch water down there is very variable. So, for example, in the last couple of years, we have not got hardly any. And even if we get some, it's based off of when it comes, when the order is filled. So it's variable even from the timing of when we get it. We looked back in the last, since the agreement was in place, of what it's cost us to maintain the pump system. And that's the number you see there, at about $75,000. And unfortunately, we're at a point where we need to make a decision, and that's where this came forward. Either an investment of about $25,000 to get the pump replaced, which we know from history does not actually make the system fully functional for us and doesn't work. It requires a larger investment that we did talk to and sat down with the mayor and Chris Kirk, the town administrator, and Bertha, and talk through what can this really look like in a long term. Because the simple solution of just the pump fix doesn't fix it for TSD. We still have a problem ongoing maintenance costs, pump replacement. Unfortunately, the design system does not fit the need of the parties because we can't water because without going to hydraulics, basically there's a tank underground, pump turns on, it sucks it dry, and then we literally have to send someone down and click it back on. So that's been going on for the last several years. So that's we've replaced the pump prior, and now it's out because of just that constant, it's really a misengineered system design for where we're at. So the proper, one of the proper fixes is really to work with the town and ourselves, we're the two biggest water users in Berthoud, and come up with a larger solution that then this solution could be a part of, or this resident could then be a part of. So what that really is building a large storage facility for water, either a pond, or we would pull right out of if you're going south to Berthoud, there's that Loveland ditch, the pond that's there. Basically, we put a pipe into that, and that would be the storage system. So there's solutions out there that we've talked about. Unfortunately, they take time and money, and that's the next set of conversations out there. But we are in conversations, and we did talk to Jane's here. We sat down with Jane as well and talked through the position the district is at and the complexities of this and how it, now we have to put some substantial dollars if we were to keep this agreement in place. So we recognize, and we had a very candid, lovely conversation about just it is hard, and we understand that, and the town understands that, and unfortunately we're in a tough situation. I mean, it is just that, and I can't express why 10 years ago there was this, and there's history, and there's a lot of that we respect and recognize, but this is where we're at now, and part of why the recommendation is we move forward. And the hope that is we can work with the town and city and then come up with more of a three-way agreement with the town, because that's the pivotal part in how this is really going to work even for us. We can't do it by ourselves. It takes that leg to help produce put a system in place that we can use. The final note I'll say is we do have enough water shares, for Turner area, as far as this area. So it's not a matter of water shares. We can still use it. So we're not saying we're abandoning, dishwater use altogether. But for example, last year, I think even the town may not be able to use dishwater because unfortunately it's just not there, or it goes to other priorities. So, you can talk about water. There's all sorts of different conversations around water, how it works and why, but I want to provide just a general overview of the agreement, kind of where we're at, the decision point, where it puts the district as far as some financial pieces. So that's why we were last meeting suggesting on approving that, and then next meeting we'll ask for consent, and then we're here to continue that.
And then, and I was part of that meeting as well, and I'll just also bring forward, just for full transparency as a result of that, just two other pieces of our conversation. One, there's very high interest on the part of the town of Berthoud to engage in a partnership with us around this solution. So I know that the town of Berthoud has a very high interest. And I also know if Jean could speak, she would want me to share that her ask or her wonder is to suspend the agreement, so not to cancel the agreement, but that did come forward in the conversation as a consideration. So I just wanted to make sure that was brought forward just for full transparency.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start over with Nancy this time.
You threw me for a loop with the suspend thing. So it sounds like right now, the way it is, it's just too costly. It doesn't make enough sense. So if we end it, or if we suspend it, then that is what there's a possibility that there'd be more time to develop and figure out this partnership between the city of Berthoud and, I'm so sorry I forgot your name, and the school district. Is that what you're saying?
Say that one more time, sorry. I think others, yes.
So if we end this agreement or suspend it, either way, then the next goal would be to have the time to develop the partnership between the city, the school district, and Jane, to figure out a longer-term, better solution. Is that what I was hearing?
That's correct, because the bigger issue is really not, this agreement is even secondary than the town issue and our issue. This is really secondary to that issue. The bigger issue that you need to figure out is how to actually tap into the main water source at a large volume, so how to tap into the reservoir. And that's going to take time to start. I do know the town's engaging in their master plan for ditch water, so they are looking at what is their master plan for water usage. And this is part of that kind of design and conversation. But yeah, that is more of a case of just because the district and town are the largest shareholders actually in that area. So then we'd have to figure out how it actually works and what is the system to transport in a way that we can actually use it.
Okay. Alexandra?
What would be the difference in our, like, responsibilities and legal liability and so on and so forth if we were to end versus suspend?
So moving forward, the solution is obviously a bigger piece between the district and town, like we just talked about. The challenge was suspend, even if that goes forward and we fix, somehow the issue gets fixed, let's just pretend it's fixed. The challenge then is it's not really, this agreement's not contractually in place anyway, because it's an agreement then with us, the town, and residents. So that's a challenge, is this, regardless, the fix is going to be with the town and us. And then, Jane's solution into that. That agreement would be separate than this, because there's 3 entities involved, not just 2.
Okay. Okay.
That makes sense.
So either way, this agreement would be moved or.
Yeah, because technically it's, we'd be breach of contract because, we're not supplying what's in here. There's a whole nother actual agreement that we'd have to work through.
Okay.
And then it gets into water rights, because then the water rights are going to a different place than here. And anyway.
Okay.
Pam?
That was my question, and just thanks for the additional information tonight. This really clarifies things a lot. And so I appreciate all of that work that you guys did to make sure we're understanding the details. Thanks.
Stu?
The original agreement, as Todd alluded to, was between the school district and Jane, the property owner. The town was not part of that original agreement. And so the fact that the town now appears to be interested, I don't know whether the town was interested 10 years ago when the agreement was written or not, but that's really neither here nor there. Certainly does present another option that when we looked at this at our last meeting, that option really wasn't there with the town being part of it, because the town is not part of this agreement. So I'm glad that gives us an additional option regardless of how it ultimately turns out.
Amy? Okay. Huh?
We covered it.
Mine too. Nancy? Stu? Mark? No? Okay. I think that's it. Everybody's okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Todd.
Appreciate it. And it comes back to us,
We'll bring it forward
on the
on the
14th.
15th.
15th, yes. Okay. Item 3.3, the annual comprehensive financial report. I know that has some ACFR draft. And this is actually the 21-22, so it's this last year's. It's not anything to do with coming year of budget. Hello, Gordon.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Schaefer, members of the board, Gordon Jones, Chief Financial Officer for the district. What is undoubtedly the highlight of the agenda tonight.
Sit on the edge of the seat.
I'm going to keep my comments hopefully brief here and in deference to the board's questions that you may have on the draft document that's there. But just a few overarching comments that I'll make to begin with. An overview of the process. I think most people are familiar with this, but we are here to talk about the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or ACFR, is the acronym that's in place. It's required by law that each year the district enlist the services of an independent public auditor to audit the financial records of the district. The due date is typically December 31st of each year. There is an extension option that's out there, which the district, the board approved in November. and is in place. That extends the deadline to March 1st for final completion. Just one of the quotes from Laura, I believe it was, who presented earlier for Garfield. In her presentation, she had a quote, "Process over product." I thought that was an interesting comment. This is the product, but the process is much, much broader than that. The process is the everyday work of many people in the district, not just the financial services team or business services team, but everybody from the process of adopting the budget, first researching, providing input, adopting a budget, negotiations, bids, RFPs, issuance and approvals of purchase requisitions and purchase orders, receiving, reviewing, coding, and approving of invoices from our accounts payable team, payment of those invoices, loading of pay assignments on an annual basis, maintaining those pay assignments on an ongoing daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. Monthly payroll, average of 2,400 checks or direct deposits that are done each month. The monthly generation of the trial balance, which takes place, and that serves as the source document for the written financial report that's presented to the board each month. That's a distilled version of all of that trial balance. Compilation of the financial statements at the end of the year, preparation of the ACFR, the document that we were talking about. And I think it's important to note, or worthwhile to note, that TSD maintains separate financial records for each one of the individual funds that the district has. That's 9 separate and distinct funds. Examples of those are general fund, bond redemption fund, capital projects, nutrition services, construction fund, just to name a few. There's also sub-reporting or sub-funds within that. So for each individual MLO that has been approved by voters in the district, there's a separate sub-fund of the general fund that's maintained for the 99, 2006, and 2018 MLOs as well. Our trial balance, when we run that, I looked at last year's, the full document, over 26,000 unique account codes. That's across all those funds, so 26,000 plus lines of data that is the repository or holding for all of the individual transaction level detail that takes place throughout the year. The auditors are available. Our independent auditors is Hinkle & Company. That's the audit firm that we use. They're available for consultation and questions year-round, which we certainly engage with them if we have accounting questions or how should this particular item be recorded in the budget. We provide them that transaction level detail within all of those 26,000 account codes. They take that information and then select their sample sizes or samples that they want to see, and they will take that all the way back to the source document, meaning what does our budget look like? What was the PO that was issued for this particular expenditure? Was there a PO issued? What was the process for the invoice, making sure that was approved and correctly and coded to the correct place, all those different things. They select an appropriate number of samples to give them a reasonable assurance, not an absolute assurance. They are not looking at every transaction, which would be in likely the hundreds of thousands, but they are taking an approach to get a reasonable assurance that our financial statements are accurately presented. They review this document. It's the responsibility of the district to prepare the document, and the auditor's role is to then get reasonable assurances that those numbers are correct. So that's the work that we've done with them. They also perform a single audit, which is work that's required by the federal government for any unit that receives federal funds. You have to take part in what's called the single audit. So each year they select one of our federal programs, 1 or 2 or 3 in some cases of our federal programs, and look at those on a rotating basis of every 3 or 4 years they're getting looked at. Those could be programs like Head Start, nutrition services, the funding that we get from that for free and reduced meals, special education. ESSER is a big one lately that's been taking place. They also sign off on the data integrity report, which is the document that the district prepares We upload that through the CDE system that they have and that's a validation method to make sure first that the coding agrees with the CDE chart of accounts. That's what we're governed by. How we establish our chart of accounts is by CDE guidelines of account codes, fund numbers, object codes, SREs, program codes, a variety of different meanings behind these. So there's CDE has a large chart of accounts document that details that in much more detail. There's also a board mandated or board directed audit advisory committee. So AAC, our Audit Advisory Committee, it's comprised of one representative that's nominated by each board member, as well as the treasurer of the board, which is Mr. Boyd, as well as myself. That committee meets with the district auditor to discuss their process, rationale, support from staff, any findings they have, any of those types of things. That's what this committee hears directly from the auditors, with and without me in the room. Sometimes that's not a requirement, but it's something I think is important. So I excuse myself from the meeting to let the committee members, without me being present, that maybe allows them to speak more openly and freely about the financial preparation of the information for the district. That leads us to the draft document that's presented to the board tonight, and the final version that we brought forward at the next meeting on the 15th. Proper protocol, or I guess the right term, is common practice is for the board then to accept that audit document. Once that's done, then staff of the district files that with CDE, the Office of the State Auditor, banks that we have relationships with, the Municipal Securities Reporting Board, or MSRB, a variety of different entities like that want to have that information. We also submit it on an annual basis to two organizations, the Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA, and Association of School Business Officials, or ASBO, for peer review and consideration for their certificate of excellence that they issue if our annual report meets the guidelines of what they deem to be necessary. Then once we have all of that, we then post the final document, the ACFR, on our financial transparency portion of the district website. Current in 2 prior years, I believe we have current in 5 prior years of our annual report out there. So those are some quick comments overall. Items that aren't included in this version tonight that the board has, because the auditors are still doing final reviews, those things. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned these. There are placeholders in the document that you will see for these items, but there's no information in there, but we should have that likely not this week, but early next week, to then have that in the final version. It's required to be in the final version. Those are the independent auditors report. That's their opinion letter, which is pages 13 through 15. The independent auditors report on internal controls, which they also check during their audit. That's pages 123 and 124. Independent auditors report on compliance, which is the single audit that I mentioned. That's pages 125 through 127. And federal awards findings and question costs is page 131. And the auditor's integrity report, which is the upload of our financial information and validation with CDE that everything is in order, is page 132. I know this is a big document. It's 141 pages of pure reading pleasure that not everybody wants to read. Some members of our board I know spend a considerable amount of time, and your attention to that is admirable and appreciated. I also am not offended by board members that may not read cover to cover, but I think it's, if I could give you a Cliff Notes version of focus areas that I think are the most important of the document. This is strictly my opinion. The transmittal letter is pages 1 through 6. The That has some information about the district, financial, economic conditions of the area, of the state, of the district, a variety of different things. So just an overview of the report. The independent auditor's report, which is not in this version but will be, that's the reason we go through an audit, to get hopefully with a clean opinion or an unmodified opinion is what we want there. We have not been notified of any material findings thus far in their work. All of the audit work is done for checking of samples and all of that. Now it's just ticking and tying numbers. Management's discussion and analysis, or MD&A, which is pages 16 through 31, again gives more verbiage or narrative on the annual report, the financial statements. To me, there's a lot of financial statements in here. To me, the most beneficial are the comparisons of budget to actual. And we have budget to actual for each one of those independent funds that I talked about. So the individual funds comparison to budget is pages 75 through 99. And if you are really desiring more background on accounting policies, procedures, estimates used in our accounting numbers, all of those things, you can look at the notes to the financial statement. Again, that's more accounting detail, but it gives you an idea of some of those things. Those are pages 41 through 69, but I would be remiss if I didn't note that one of those footnotes in those 28 pages is a 15-page footnote related to para and the district's proportionate share of the unfunded liability of para. So if you really want to have a fun accounting experience, reading that one footnote of 15 pages. Sorry those comments maybe weren't so brief, but hopefully that gives you an overview of the process, the document, and what's to be expected in this document, and then brought forth for your consideration at the next meeting.
Thank you. And we'll start with board questions. And I'm going to start this time with Amy. Do you have any on budget? Stu?
Not really any questions, but this is the second year that I've sat on the Audit Advisory Committee as a board representative. And this is a committee that the first time that you're in it, it's kind of a deer in the headlights look. Have you ever been on this committee before? This time through, I had a much clearer understanding. We met with the auditor virtually, and he answered questions. I find the letter of transmittal really interesting and very clear in terms of kind of an introduction to the whole process. I will share with you that the auditor, a couple or three times during our session, complimented business services on transparency and on record keeping. Looking through the document itself quickly, I think I understand why. So no, I don't have a question, but I did want to just share with you, since I'm your representative on that committee, that I feel very good about the process, the transparency, the record keeping, and the fact that, again, the district has received awards from these two organizations that Gordon mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Stu.
Yeah.
Pam?
Really more a comment also is that every year that the district goes through this process, I'm more and more impressed, and I'm also the realization of what a critical piece this is for our community to understand and to really have confidence in the accountability of the district, the transparency of the district, and the excellence of our CFO and of business services as a whole. This is a hugely complex organization. And so, I mean, you compare Thompson School District to a lot of private organizations with the number of employees and everything. They don't go through this, 29,000 lines. I won't even try to repeat everything that goes into running the district. And so I think it's important every year to stop and say, wow, and thank you, and please thank your staff for us, because this is, and our audit committee too, because this is our taxpayers. It really gives, I think, our citizens confidence in the district. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Alexandra, anything?
No, thank you.
Okay. Nancy?
I know I submitted a lot, and I think that it was sent out as an RFI. So there's always a lot of great information in it, and I know what it takes to put it together. And so I would just, like you said, the MDA, the management report has a ton of stuff. I learn something new every time I read it. The statistical section, there's always something in there that provides a much greater insight into the district, and it has the historical. So it's just, if you don't get intimidated by the 150 pages, just go to like statistical section and maybe the analysis, and you can really pick up on a lot of really good information. And this information would not be possible unless we had a really strong accounting and finance department led by a really strong CFO. So thank you, Gordon.
Thank you for your comments.
I don't have any. Do you have any questions?
I was just gonna give you more compliments. I feel like we covered a lot of ground, and I could write you a pages about it, but I didn't because I was asked if it was a question. It was a question, and I had no question, but I do have comments of praise, thanks, transparency. I echo all this, so I don't want to look like I didn't. But I was asked if there were questions.
What a good student. All right, for any other questions now? Okay, comments made. We do totally appreciate you and your team, and it's huge, and we know that.
Thank you, I appreciate the comments. I'll save my thanks for the next meeting more formally, but this is not one individual, this is not one department, this is the work of the district, and there are many people that touch this process, so I appreciate your comments though.
And thank you for taking time to highlight for us.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Really. All right, 3.4 is the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, CBOC, member selection.
Good evening again, our President, Board of Education, Dr. Schaefer. Tonight for discussion or questions, we always bring forward the new members that we hope to bring on to CBOC. So the CBOC was put together when the bond passed in 2018, and it's an oversight committee for the board directly with staff. So it's currently there's currently 16 members on it. There are 5 that are up for, their term is up, so 3 have would like to be reappointed. So our chair said that was appropriate as long as the board also sees it appropriate. And then we have 2 that did not want to seek reappointment that will come to the board for a blind draw. So if the board recalls, we have a little basket of names. I awkwardly walk up. And
It's very, very scientific.
Yeah. We draw the names. So through applications, there's the 2 sections are citizen at large, just a citizen at large, and then a citizen represented from Loveland. So those both are 2 just blind draws. The other categories are board selected through applications, but those aren't the seats that are up. The only 2 seats that are up that do not want reappointment are the citizen at large blind draw.
So you'll come with your basket next
I'll
time.
come with my little basket and we'll draw a couple names. And,
Decorated.
yeah.
Are there questions for Todd over his little basket or anything? Okay. No?
I have a question.
Okay.
Have you been, are people applying for these
That's a
positions?
good question.
Yes.
Okay.
So, every time we've done this, there's never a shortage of individuals. It's always a lot of community engagement to be a part of this. And, I think as you know, because you sit on it, it's a very engaged committee. They're very involved, so which is great.
Cool. All right. Thank you. All right. 3.5 is just a placeholder for the fact that we will still have action consent items, and so it was just an example letting us know that so far what we know would be the personnel piece from HR that we get, as well as donations, gifts and donations. Anything else that you know of at this point, other than some always show up?
And what I'll share with you is that even though our working session is an opportunity to dive deeply into what you're going to be asked to consider at the regular meeting, personnel decisions or personnel recommendations can and often will come like even the day of a meeting. And so what you see here, or what we'll always bring to you, is like the most current. I could tell you we have a number of processes are always in process, and so that will be updated. And same with donations, those can come in. So we were gonna just put this in as a placeholder just to be consistent with the purpose of this working session, but just know that this will be truly variable.
Yeah, but those are the things that are what we're referring to when we say action consent items. Standard action consent items are just those. Okay? All right. We need a quick break, but we also want to do CASB, and CASB's 10 minutes. Do you want to do it before we take a quick little walk about or not?
Your choice. Doesn't matter.
What would the board like to do?
Well, let's crack through it and then we'll.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take a quick break right after Stu's finished with his CASB.
All right. Are you talking to me?
I am.
Oh. I think I can get through it in 10 and maybe less than that.
I'm watching the clock.
And if I exceed next time, you can give the report because it takes quite a bit of time to try to condense this.
Well, sure, having this helps, I think. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Fire away.
All right. I'd encourage you to read the 6 highlighted items at the top. I'm not going to go through those with you. They're not a summary, they're additional information that came from the various meetings. We probably looked at 30 to 35 different bills. I picked the ones that I thought were most relevant and the ones that perhaps would create the most interest here. So what you have in Board Docs or in your Google Doc is a list of the bills that I'm going to review with you. I have just a little additional information about each one. If you want to type it in, you could do that. If you want to just listen, that's perfectly fine too. Beginning with HB 23-1109. Let me stop just for a second. You probably know that HB is House Bill, SB is Senate Bill. First one deals with school policies and student conduct. I don't have a lot to say about this one, and I'll tell you why in just a second. It requires new rules and regulations, particularly regarding student expulsions and suspensions. The reason that I'm not going to spend much time on it is CASB is opposed to this bill, as are CASE and the Rural Alliance. So there are features of this bill that organizations that deal greatly with matters like this feel are problematic, and problematic to the extent that the decision was made to oppose the bill rather than to ask for it to be amended. Moving on to SB 23-029, disproportionate discipline in public schools. This is an interesting bill because it requires that each school district board of education and each charter school board of education must address disproportionate disciplinary practices, particularly as they relate to minority students. The purpose of the bill is to strengthen due process for students. It would increase state expenditures in 2023-24 to fund the bill. If it passes, it will also increase workload for school district staff because of the different components of it. The CASB Legislative Committee, which from here on out I'm going to refer to as the LRC, has voted to ask the legislature to amend the bill to address a number of concerns, and I won't go into those right now. I'll talk to you about those at whatever point it comes back amended. On behalf of the district, Dr. Schaefer has already provided feedback to CASB on this bill. Moving on to House Bill 23-1001, expanding assistance for educator programs. This expands financial assistance for prospective teachers in ed prep programs, and for the first time also includes prospective principals. In addition to expanding financial assistance, it allows something very interesting about the bill. It allows for student teaching for Colorado students to extend to up to 100 miles outside of state boundaries. And they're hoping that the combination of the expanded financial assistance as well as allowing the students to actually go a ways out of state boundaries, that it will increase the number of Colorado students who are going into teaching and into the principal life as well. Dr. Schaefer has already provided feedback to CASB on this bill as well. All right, moving on to the next one, which is 1003, School Mental Health Assessment. Recently, this bill was moved from the House Education Committee to the Health and Human Services Committee, and it creates a mental health assessment program that districts may opt into for grades 6 through 12. There will be much more information coming on this because there are aspects of this bill that are problematic for some people, and so this particular bill is going to have a lot of discussion. The next one, Interstate Teacher Mobility Compact, makes it easier for educators to gain licenses to teach in Colorado. It's specifically geared toward military spouses and former military members. The LRC voted to support this bill, not to ask for any amendments, because the passage will bring more teachers into the hiring pool by expanding the pool easily to include military spouses and former military. HB 23-1065, Local Government Independent Ethics Commission. This one is still very much in the early stages. The reason that I think we should be interested in this is for the first time it would bring boards of education under jurisdiction of the State Ethics Commission if complaints are lodged against individuals or the board. So at this point, it's been introduced, and it will be discussed. Moving on to Senate Bill 23-004, employment of school mental health professionals. You will recognize this as Senator Marchman's bill, and there is a Zoom session on that, I believe, tomorrow morning at 11:30, and I think everybody on the board got an invitation to that. It expands the pool of mental health professionals who can work in schools. It resides in the Health and Human Services Committee because I think of the health aspect of the title, but of course, what happens to this bill directly affects statewide education. And it's due to be heard and discussed in mid-February. Mark, did you want to say something about this?
I'm just not sure that every member of the board received an invite to that.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm not sure every member of the board, our Board of Education received an invitation.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought that everybody received it.
Yeah, I don't. Could you repeat what that is, Stu, just so I can?
Yes, it's Senate Bill 23-004, employment of school mental health professionals. And the reason I thought that everybody did, there was a very long list of people who received it. I looked at it really quickly. I know that at least 4 of us were on the list because I happened to catch the names. I assumed everybody was. I'm sure the intention was not to. And it's virtual. It's a Zoom meeting. Yes, it's tomorrow at 11:30. Pam, could you send that invitation to Laura Lee so she could send it to the other people?
Is this to replace the meeting she was trying to hold with that we got emails
I
about?
believe it.
It was
I
going to be
believe
initially
so.
like the 26th or
Mhm.
something, and now it's the 2nd, yeah.
And it's virtual. It's just virtual.
Yeah, it's virtual. It's only supposed to last a half an hour from 11:30 to 12 o'clock tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, so Laura Lee will send that out. Okay, thanks, Mark. I didn't realize that. Okay, just one more, and that's Senate Bill 23056, compensatory direct distribution to para. And this directly affects the pension plan for our staff and for retirees. And Dr. Sievers may already know some stuff about this, but I'll just do a real quick summary of what was discussed at the meeting. A bill was passed in 2018 to direct the General Assembly to make a $225 million contribution to para. COVID happened, it interrupted, it stopped the payments. This bill would make up some of the lost revenue that resulted in para not being able to invest those funds. And from what was discussed at the meeting, it does directly affect the health of the pension system. At the bottom, I have for you other bills you may be interested in. I think I put that on your sheet, didn't I?
No.
No, okay.
Time is up. No, I'm kidding. Go.
No, that's fine.
No, you got things you were going to share something else. What were the
I
other?
did, but I was told I was done,
It
so.
was a joke. No sense of humor.
Jokes aren't always perceived that way, especially from some people on the board. All right, 4 bills that I can call your attention to. House Bill 23-1004, employer notice of income tax credits. I asked Gordon to provide feedback to CASB. He's already done that, and we've gotten word back from them that they appreciated his feedback. Also, House Bill 23-1118, the name of the bill is Fair Workweek Employment Standards. Gordon also has already provided feedback on this one. 2 more. Senate Bill 23023, CPR training in high schools. And I'll just let you read it. If you want to know some of the comments that were made, just contact me and I can share those with you. And Senate Bill 23065 is called Career Development Success Program, and this is in the early stages. So let me know if you want me to continue these reports. Also, let me know if there's something I can do with the report to make it more relevant. And it is difficult with 3 hours of meetings and like 30 bills to actually confine it to exactly 10 minutes. Go ahead.
I was just, can you, when you make this report, can you include the link to the bill? I mean, I know how to go to the state legislative site and find it, but if the link's already here, you'd probably get more people to do it.
I bet Laura Lee can do that. When I send her the bill, she can probably provide
We'll
the
provide the
link.
link to you.
I'll just put it on the Google
We'll
Doc.
put it on the Google Doc, so it'll be hyperlinked, and if you hit it, it'll take you right to the bill.
Yeah.
I can show you because it's just makes, yeah.
5-minute break.
Can I just-
Sure, go ahead.
So this is kind of sort of parallel to this, but also maybe for future agenda setting. The board had expressed interest potentially of maybe meeting with elected officials to really just share some feedback or have some dialogue. I'm happy to try to arrange that if there's interest on the board, and we can either create a special meeting or tie it into a working session, but maybe we put that under future agenda topics if the board would like to do that. I just am attaching it to the legislative report because it's look.
Have you done the CASB legislative day yet?
I haven't, I don't know if I will.
Okay.
Okay,
That's interesting.
a quick break. Restroom, where are they? Are they just across the way? That was.
Sit your board, come on.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started again, and we're gonna switch our agenda just a teeny bit. We're gonna let climate and culture go first before strive, because the cabinet has to stay anyway. Jennifer doesn't have to. We don't let cabinet go. So, just wait. So we'll let you come on. Of course. There's some letters.
You're on.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Schaefer. I have Dr. Jennifer Beckles here to present to you climate and culture survey data from Panorama, so I'm going to let her take it away.
Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Schaefer, members of the board. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share with you what has now become our annual tradition of some highlights and overviews from our recent climate culture survey. So, as far as connections to Strive 2025, I'll be making those throughout the presentation. As I've reviewed with you before, we have quite the process for how the survey is created, how it's administered, which stakeholders it goes to, and so on and so forth. And that is linked in the overview document. I did want to mention that there was an earlier version of this slideshow that was a draft, and I didn't realize that one had gotten uploaded. So I noticed that yesterday, and so I got that to Laura Lee. So any links that were behaving strangely are working now, and I very much apologize for that. There are a lot of links, so I was working on it for quite some time, and I apologize for any frustration anyone experienced if a link wasn't doing what it was supposed to. So if you want to go deeply, deeply into that process, again, we've gone over it quite a few times in the past. That is linked in that overview document, but this is the third full round of our climate culture survey. It was administered to our staff, students, and families, as well as our community in November of 2022. The survey is delivered electronically. However, we do have, as part of our program, that they provide us with paper copies that are coded to each school for families to fill out if that gives them better access. Sure, yeah.
Just a little bit, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Might need a little louder.
Sure thing, thank you. And then I also always like to mention that what we mean by community members are people who live in our community who don't currently have kids in our schools. So those are the survey groups, and we did it this time around in fall, and that was in November of 2022. You may be sitting here thinking, well, didn't we just do it in spring of 2022? So what happened was the first year we did it in fall 2020. We did all survey groups at that time. Then we took some feedback from stakeholders, and folks really wanted us to try doing what the original design of the survey was, which was to do a fall student administration, and then in spring do an additional student administration and the rest of the stakeholder groups. So that's what we did last year. So after we went through that and reviewed the process and all sorts of feedback and whatnot, the determination was made to stick with the fall administration. And so we just got, because it has technically students have taken it each fall, and so we wanted to stick with that so we could follow that data trend. And so that's what we will be doing, is sticking to that fall time each time. And so that's why you see the spring administration followed by the fall. We will not do it again this spring, and we'll wait again until the next fall. Our surveys are designed to get a baseline for current perceptions in a variety of areas, to inform planning and implementation of school district and improvement efforts, which I believe you're going to hear in the next presentation a bit about as far as Strive 2025, and to monitor progress over time. The survey content and design has remained the same throughout all survey administrations. None of that has changed. So just a reminder about what surveys we give. So we have student surveys, and our student surveys include two parts, SEL competencies and SEL supports and environments. The competencies are students giving their perceptions of their own social emotional skills. And we ask them about social awareness, growth mindset. Panorama calls it grit, we call it perseverance, as well as emotional regulation. Those results are available in a very interesting manner to our teachers. And why I say interesting is because in order to protect confidentiality for our students, what teachers can see is where they rate on that entire topic. So for instance, growth mindset, they can see the red, yellow, or green. They can't see how the students answered individual questions. And the idea behind that is to allow our students to feel that they can be really open and honest with what's going on with them. So the other thing we ask our students about are the supports environment. So that's their perceptions about all of us around them and how are we doing in supporting them. And so that's where we monitor sense of belonging, teacher-student relationships, and school safety. Those results are not in that dashboard that teachers see with the red, yellow, green, just the competencies. So then our teacher surveys, so our teachers actually take a survey in addition to the staff survey that I'm going to cover in the next slide. Okay, so our teachers are asked about two different sets of things. So our teachers, we ask them about their perceptions of their own professional strengths and areas for growth related to SEL, including their ability to motivate, challenge, and support students' SEL needs. So that's the teacher self-reflection. And then we also ask about SEL professional development, of course, because if we're saying this is something that we want you to know how to do, we want to make sure that we're helping you know how to do that. So there's a lot of components to that, but that's the teacher survey. And then we go into the staff surveys. Our staff surveys go to all employee groups, APT, licensed and classified, and that's where we ask about what we would typically think of as school climate, right? So staff leadership relationships, school safety, school climate. We're asking you about perceptions of trust, support, motivation, respect, fairness, perceptions of attitudes and behavior of and relationships between staff and staff, students and staff, and students and students, where we're looking at indicators for a healthy school climate. Then in our family and community surveys, we ask them about their perceptions of school and district priorities, strengths and opportunities, as well as school climate, safety, communication, and environments. And for the community portion, since they don't have students in our schools, they answer about the perceptions of school district priorities, strengths, and opportunities. We don't ask them about the school climate in the same way because they don't have kids currently in our schools. And then the other thing I would like to remind folks of is that Panorama is the company that delivers this survey for us, and they're a company that schools can contract with nationwide. And so some of the questions that our team, the very collaborative interdisciplinary team that Andy was on actually all those many years ago, when we selected those questions, some of them are in the national set that others have selected. And so you might notice when you look at the survey results, you might see some places where it will say something about how it compares to a national average, and some of them don't say that. It's because some of the questions we selected aren't part of that set, but they were important to us for other reasons. So response rates. Obviously, we attend to this very carefully because the higher the response rates, the more valid the results are. Our student response rates are really strong. As you can see, we're at 76% on both components of the student survey, which is quite similar to spring and even up a little bit on the competencies as compared to last spring. Our teacher surveys, as you can see, very high response rate, 80%, which is similar to spring 2022, and we have traditionally had a really good response from our teachers. Our staff response rate might catch you by surprise because that looks like quite a drop from spring. What is interesting is that for the first time when I worked with ITS to roster all of our students and staff, I asked if we could include information that would allow us to disaggregate by division. So in the past, we'd only be able to see by schools or just basically you work in a school or you don't work in a school. And so we were able to add a little bit more detail so I could pull out school staff, say, versus people that work in HR, for instance. And what we saw was that since our last spring administration, those who do not work in brick and mortar school settings had a lower response rate. So the staff response rate was actually just as high as the teacher response rate if they work in a brick and mortar setting. So we've seen a dip there. So of course, when you see a change in data like that, you want to know why. So I'm very lucky to get to join a group on a monthly basis that I apologize for this, we jokingly call ourselves the Dragon Council. It's a very long story, but what it is, it's a group of managers from all over the district, every single division. And it's a way for us to collaborate and connect across divisions. And so I went over all the data with them and asked them if they would help me look into why did their division staff not respond to this at as higher rate in the spring. It might be as simple as they're like, we just did this in the spring, or I was busy that day, or for our school staff, we require time set aside during a staff meeting so staff don't feel pressured that they have to find their own time to do it. We don't necessarily do that for division staff. That might not be as a regular occurrence. There could be a variety of reasons, but we need to find out what it is so we can address it for our next administration. It could include that the questions don't feel relevant to them too. So I went over all that with the Dragon Council yesterday, so they're going to help me out in looking into what's going on there. Our family response rates, you can see that it looks like they're a bit down from spring. 12% is obviously not what we're hoping for. So what we think happened there is that in the spring, we actually were excited to see that response rate of 38%. That was an uptick. And it's because we overlapped it with parent-teacher conferences, we believe. Mm-hmm. And then we had a very concerted promotion effort, thanks to support from communications and the federal programs team and our school principals and survey leads. And when we moved it to fall, we were not able to back the prep up far enough to have it ready in time. So I just had a meeting with the person I work with from ITS today about what can we do about that, because we are pretty sure that that's the reason we saw that drop. And so we're going to look at how we could bump out at least that portion of the survey administration to be able to start sooner so they can overlap with parent-teacher conferences in the fall. Our community response, as you can see, is up a bit from spring. So there is a ton of data in here. So I just selected a few highlights from each of the surveys for you. So I'm going to start with the students, of course. So our sense of belonging is rated well above the national average for our elementary students and continues to improve when we look over time. And I should mention that we're very excited that we now have 3 years of data, right? So we can now say we have a baseline. So I'm going to keep mentioning things that have jumped out because they've been true over time. So sorry if that's kind of a broken record, but that's one of the things I thought would be really helpful for you to hear. So our sense of belonging for our elementary students has been well above the national average, and it continues to improve. Unfortunately, our secondary student responses continue to fall below the national average in this area, and there's not really been much of a change. So it's pretty static. Our elementary students show growth on all competencies as well, which is very exciting, and all of them are at or above the national average. Our secondary students, again, are very static in that area. One other detail of note that I found was interesting, within that secondary data, our sixth graders respond much more favorably to sense of belonging than all other levels, which as a middle school teacher, I have to say that's really interesting because it is a really hard thing to go from elementary school to middle school. So you intuitively might think it would be the other way around. But in fact, we have some really great responses from our sixth graders. So what are we doing in sixth grade that we might be needing to do in seventh grade?
Jennifer, I could just interject just for a second. Jennifer has been attending our student groups, so the elementary, middle, and we'll be meeting with the high school groups because we wanted to drill down and probe. A lot of times when you get a survey, you can't ask students why or what would it take to maybe improve or what. So we have a good sample, and I know in January, Jennifer met with my elementary and middle school groups, and then coming up in a few weeks, she'll meet with high school groups, just to drill a little bit more. We have very high interest, especially in secondary, with some of the stagnant growth, and we'll just ask kids. Middle school kids are pretty clear with us in terms of what they like and where they might see some opportunities.
The elementary and middle school students were so engaged. It was just an absolute delight to hear what they had to say. So my wonderful admin assistant, Brandy Hamilton, is typing up the copious notes that the kids shared with us. So I'm very excited to look at some trends and ideas and share them back with our schools as soon as we have that ready. A little bit more about our students. Teacher-student relationships are rated well above the national average for our elementary students, similar to past survey administrations. And our school safety ratings for all grade levels are at or above the national average, similar to past survey administrations. So that is very exciting. I'd like to move into teachers now. So our teacher perceptions on SELPD were favorable, and they do show improvement this spring and are at the national average. I'm going to be really direct and say that I'm not satisfied with the national average in this case, because when you look at what that number is, I'm like, oh, come on, we can do better. So we will continue to reflect and push ourselves even though we're at that national average. And then teacher self-reflections were mixed, and sometimes below the national average and sometimes they weren't. It was pretty mixed, so I pulled out some numbers for you that you might find interesting. So the highest rated teacher self-reflection question at 82% favorable was, how thoroughly do you feel that you know all the content you need to teach? So that was one where people were like, I'm feeling really good about that. The lowest rated was at 45%. So this is when I'm like, I'm just going to describe it as mixed. 82 and 45 are wildly different. And that question was, how confident are you that you can help your school's most challenging students to learn? Okay. And then the last one I wanted to pull out from the teacher survey was, teachers rated their school being supportive of their growth in teaching SEL very favorably, which is great, because again, if we're saying that this is an area of focus for us, then we want our teachers to feel supported in that work. So a little bit more on that teacher, I'm sorry, I already covered this actually, that the teacher reflection, they reported high ratings on knowing their content. A couple other areas that they rated very highly, confidence in their ability to support and grow students' growth mindset, growth and development, and social awareness, and that is the same as spring 2022, so teachers are feeling really good there. As I mentioned before, they're feeling some, they're lacking some confidence in motivating and engaging the most challenging students, and that has held true, but that's an area that they're needing support. So moving into the staff survey, so this is all employee groups. Staff responses were mostly favorable across all topics. Staff-teacher leadership relationships are rated favorably, especially these areas, which I just have to say is, as somebody who's been a teacher and a leader, this makes my heart very warm, that our staff is reporting that they receive support, they're treated with respect, and that their leaders have the best interests of the school in mind. This rating has been positive over time and continues to improve. Given what we've all been through in the last few years, I think that is quite notable. A little bit more on staff. School safety is rated favorably across all employee groups and genders, and this is similar to all survey administrations to date. School climate indicators do have some room for growth, such as some areas that, and this has come up before, attitudes of colleagues, as well as concern about students' enthusiasm for school. Both teachers and staff feel trusted to teach in the way they think is best, and that is similar to previous survey administrations. So moving into our families, our school climate measures are at the national average, similar to previous survey administrations. 78% of families responded favorably that they would recommend this school or district to a friend or colleague for their child, and this is held pretty steady across all of the survey administrations. One of the other things that's interesting in the families are asked and communities are asked is they're given the same, if you haven't taken this survey, some of you may have taken it, you're given kind of the same list of kind of topics, and you're asked both like how well is it going and how important it is to you. And so of course we're wanting to look at where does it connect, that either we're doing really well and that's really important to people, yay, or people are kind of worried and it's really important to them, like what are we gonna do about that? So a little bit more on that as we get further. Oh, good thing I know the rest of this presentation because it didn't all print. So it's okay. I'll just answer my shoulder thing. Let's see. All right, sorry about that. So this is what I'm talking about, where we ask our families about next 3-year priorities. So. Our families have identified areas of priority of hiring, developing, and retaining best staff, classroom instruction, and student achievement, and these are similar to past survey administrations. Actually, let's go to the next slide. Actually, could you go back for me? I'm sorry about this. I just do want to mention that our families also indicate that the hiring, developing, retaining best staff is an area that they see as has room for improvement for us. So that's one of those ones where it crosses the wrong way, right? They're saying, hey guys, we're worried about this and it's super important to us. And that has held true across survey administrations. So community members, 73% of our community members, that same question about would you recommend us, 73% of them said yes. And that's actually up, I believe, 9 points from the spring. I thought this was very exciting to see this. Our community reports to us that they're feeling welcome, valued, and respected at our schools. I'm sorry, this is the one that's improved 9 points, my apologies. And you'll notice that these areas for improvement are pretty similar to some that our staff bring up, and hiring and retention is also a priority for our community. Which, there we go. I set the slide ahead of time. Sorry about that. So just a few celebrations and then some areas for growth that we will be focusing on. As I mentioned, all survey groups rate school safety favorably. That's not to say that there's not pockets of growth or maybe a school where there's more growth needed than others. But overall, all survey groups consistently have rated school safety favorably. I think that is just absolutely wonderful given that this has held true during and after the pandemic lockdown. Our teacher SEL responses and all staff climate and culture responses were favorable overall, and again, the fact that that has held true throughout the hard times that our country has endured is really remarkable. I really enjoyed this one, so I had to celebrate this one as well. Our students at the both elementary and secondary level and their parents and guardians say that their teachers are highly respectful of them. That is a wonderful thing to hear. And again, that has held steady over time. So some areas for growth. I'm sure it's no surprise to you that we do not want to see those static areas for our secondary students and sense of belonging and teacher-student relationships. We know that that's critical to their success in school. A competency that we could attend to for our secondary students would be emotion regulation. I'm sure any of us with teenagers in our house would say, well, not always be true, but we're not at the national average there, so we really need to work on that. As far as areas of growth identified for our elementary students, they are still telling us, despite a lot of growth and all of these competences, that they still really could use some help with emotion regulation and perseverance. So emotion regulation might be, can I pull myself out of the bed? That sort of a question. And those have held steady as well throughout survey administrations. An area of growth identified by our staff, relevancy and individualization of SLPD, and this has also held steady. It's fascinating because this school district has some of the most individualized PD of any place I've ever been, but we will keep going. But that, especially because that has held true over time, that our staff are like, we want it even more individualized, so we will try. An area of growth identified by our communities and families, as I mentioned earlier, hiring, developing, and retaining best staff. Our families rate the current status of this focus lower than other areas, while also rating as a very high priority for the next 3 years, and that has held steady over time. So as far as what do we do with all this data? So we worked very closely with our wonderful support in ITS as well as Panorama to be able, and our schools also, of course, were a huge help in this, thanks to their very successful administration this year. So we were able to release the data to our schools in December this year. And so they were able to come right back into all that happens in January of planning for the second half of the year and also starting to think about the following year. This time we got all our ducks in a row and they were able to jump right on it. So they've been working on that for quite some time. Of course, we have reviewed this data with district and building level SEL mental health staff and had many data-driven dialogues on that. And then our survey results are incorporated into the Inclusive and Supportive Culture Implementation Team project, which includes all of our schools. There's a variety of other ways that this is used, but those are some I thought you might want to, I wanted to highlight for you. And of course, the intention when the survey was, designed was that we could help inform action planning for buildings as well as learning services. And because there's the climate culture portion that includes all of our staff, It could be used by departments such as human resources. As well, just a reminder that we do have our collaborative interdisciplinary social emotional learning partnership team, and we engage in data-driven dialogue to get direct feedback from staff every time we do this. So they're next. I always set it up so it's after you get to hear about it. So the next SALT meeting we have, they will hear the same presentation and have time to dig into the data and give some input and feedback. And then as Dr. Schaefer said, we also do that with our students at the 3 different level advisory sessions. So the next slide is the one that has the link to all of the really detailed survey results for those of you who want to dig into that. I don't know if your intention tonight was to take some time to dig into that and have data-driven dialogue. So that's there for you whenever you want. But other than that, just any questions from the board that I can answer.
Do we have some questions at all?
So one thing I'm curious about, so you, like you said, you can really see that in grades 3 through 5, you can see growth. And then you see in grades 6 to 12, it's just stagnant. And so my question is, as we're gathering all of this SEL information data on the kids, and clearly it's helping in grades 3 through 5, but then again, there's just still that big disconnect from there to 6 to 12. I'd like to understand or know how much are we bringing parents into this so that they have the same data that the teachers do about their children that might be able to help the parents at home have better insight to what's going on, or maybe even knowing what their child needs, because you can see it's clearly it's impacting, especially when you get to grades 6 to 12. So how much are we involving parents in all of this?
Thank you for that question. One of the things I would highlight, and one reason we may be seeing a difference in growth in those areas, is that we made a decision as a district. We don't have endless FTE, so we wanted to target, if we couldn't provide the same SEL support across every single building, where we target it, and we agreed to target elementary, followed by middle. And so there is a lot of support right now in our elementary schools. Now, what we may be looking at in the data is, hey, that's rolling along pretty well. Maybe do we want to rethink that? So that's an example of some of the implications that could come out of the data when we see a split like that. As far as parent involvement, that is really up to the individual schools. So we prep the site leads at each school and the principals with how to access the data, how they can use the data, how they can communicate it to families, how they can use it with their teachers, how teachers can involve their kids in setting goals around it as well. And so it's really a site-based decision about that family involvement piece at this time.
So this isn't anonymous then?
Yes, it is. But they can see similar to how in that survey result folder, you can see like percentages for various questions and the distributions. The schools have a similar dashboard, but it's just for their school. So nobody can see individual results from anybody, not even me.
Okay, good. Great. Thank you.
Jennifer, I have a question. Were charter parents included in the survey?
Our charter schools opted out.
They opted out, okay. Well, that takes care of my next question then. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a follow-up to. So my follow-up is, when I was talking about involving the parents with all this SEL, it's not necessarily just from the survey results, because it is anonymous. But I know that the schools more and more, I don't know if it's 100%, have Bloom sites. So from there, the teachers do have the information specific to a child. And so as you say, it's site-based, and I don't know if you could get this information. Do you see a difference in the kids where the site-based decision is to involve more proactively the parents than the sites that don't? Can you see that data, or I don't know if you can.
That's a great question, and let me say sort of, because that we actually been looking at as part of our partnership with the Family School Community Partnership team. And so they have helped us do some mapping, and I believe, and I don't want to misspeak, but I believe that they have been able to find some correlations between schools that are rated highly on the Family School Community Partnership. I can't remember what their scale is called, but anyway, that they have, and schools where we see more positive school climate and culture data. I don't have that for you tonight, but if you would like us to follow up with that from Family School Community Partnership, I'd be happy to work with them on that.
Okay, thank you.
That connection is actually part of the implementation team's work that we're doing around the inclusive and supportive culture. So the Family School Community Partnership is a huge component of the work we're doing in schools to improve inclusive and supportive.
And that's under that's Christy doing that. Yeah.
Christy Richards is the facilitator for that session. Yeah.
Okay.
This is kind of a tangential question, so I don't expect an answer tonight, and I don't know if this is even tracked in the district, but you know, when my kids were in high school, I was always on the SAC, whatever, you know, there was a parent committee. And it was literally pulling teeth to get parents involved, right? We would send out emails to every parent in the schools, you know, and invite them to this and that. And I was wondering, do we keep track of how many parents or percentage of parents actually take part in things like parent-teacher conferences? That might be kind of interesting as well.
Schools actually do track that.
They do, yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, that... I always remember too, sitting at SACS, and we're like, how do we get more parents to parent-teacher conferences? You can't make them come in, you can't make them talk to the teachers or all that. So that might just be an interesting, if it's readily available, I'd love to kind of see that, if that's okay with folks.
Yeah. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for having me.
Thanks. Always good information.
Yeah.
Lots and lots. All right. Our next little item is going to 5.1 now, which is Strive 2025 mid-year update.
So good evening, Board of Education. I will introduce this and then invite my colleagues to come forward and present various aspects. At the board's request, and as per our commitment to the Board of Education, we want to be able to provide for you updates on where we are with our strategic plan, Strive 2025. One of several requests were made by the Board of Education to me, which I will now share publicly. One of the requests was to anchor more of our progress in quantitative data, to be able to show either graphically, numerically, tangibly, the areas that we are growing, making progress, as well as areas where we are going to continue to work on. And I'll remind the board that we are about halfway through our strategic plan 2025, and we want to keep it fresh. We always want to keep it in front of us. We want to keep it relevant, and that's why we revisit this multiple times throughout the year, to make sure that while the destination isn't ever changing, we want to make sure that the steps that we're taking to reach our goals are relevant and organically embedded in the work that we're doing here in the district. The second request that the board has made for me and that I've tasked my very talented team is to create dashboards, a way to graphically depict in a very public and prominent way progress that we're making on our goals. And so we are in process with that, and by spring break should have something very exciting to share with you. Although we'll give you a teaser this evening because we have a prototype to show you what it's going to look like. So you can be sure, and I remind my cabinet frequently that this is a priority, and so my priorities then become their priorities, and so that's always very exciting. And so without further ado, I would like to turn this first over to Gordon Jones, our Chief Financial Officer, who will start us with the first portion of our presentation.
And we welcome embracing those priorities.
Is his review coming up?
This is right about the news,
So I get the pleasure of kicking off the update for Strive 2025, more from a general perspective, but just to remind the board and the community of the focus areas that make up Strive 2025. Focus area 1, student achievement, not just academics. This is it's much broader than that, and I'll talk about that in just a moment when we talk about more about the portrait of a graduate. Focus area 2 is inclusive and supportive culture. That transcends students, staff, community, all to encompass the feeling of belonging and feeling welcome within our district buildings. Focus area number 3 is human talent. We all hear on a daily basis the staffing challenges that are out there in our industry and most every other industry that's out there. It is literally the war for talent right now. What can TSD do to stand out in that area? Focus area number 4 is stewardship of resources. And this is centered around maintaining fiscal success of the district while continuing to strive for the other 3 areas that we have in Strive 2025. Moving on to look at the portrait of a graduate, just a reminder for the board here of the 5 areas. We would like our graduates, the goal for our graduates is to be a communicator. Key to me in this area is that they are an effective communicator, and equally as important in this is that they are good listeners. That's a key component of being a communicator. We want critical thinkers. That's not just from a knowledge standpoint, but how that knowledge is used then to take it to the next level, to delve a little deeper, and use that knowledge base to enhance their critical thinking. Citizen, we want good, productive members of society is the goal for our graduates. Collaborator, we want to have our students as they graduate or as they matriculate through our system, work with, value, and appreciate contributions of others. And lastly, self-advocate. No one path works for everybody. And to be able to provide multiple paths that fit the needs of that particular student is an important initiative that we have as a district in having a well-rounded graduate. With that, I will turn it over to Melissa.
Block the path.
So I will talk about, try to project my voice, it's coming back a little bit here. On Focus Area 1, student achievement. And so one of our goals is that by 2025, TSD will be accredited with distinction as our accreditation rating. I know that seems like a lofty aspiration, but just think about what Namaqua told us they did tonight. And it's achievable. And it's exciting to think about having that be a target for us. So in 1.1, which is eliminating disparities in student achievement and growth, graduation of behavioral outcomes, and increasing those opportunities within student groups, we've made some progress that I just want to highlight. As you heard in last week's presentation to the board, the good news about our graduation and our gaps in our graduation data coming, closing in a little bit, as well as our higher graduation rate as well. That's just was celebrations that you heard about in the last board meeting. And then I also just want to highlight too, coming your way will be a deeper dive into student achievement data by our Director of Assessment and Evaluation, Carrie Bartman, at the next board meeting. So I've provided just some high-level data here so that I don't get in too badly in the weeds with you, but you will have copious amounts of data coming your way around student achievement. But our literacy growth in 1 through 8 in our iReady data, middle of the year iReady data, is showing signs of moving in the right direction, especially with, and you don't need to click on this, might be familiar to you, but you have in that link is this new quadrant that a quadrant graph that iReady provides that shows that grades 1 through 8 are moving in the right direction in that upper right-hand corner of higher achievement and higher performance, higher growth, which is exactly where we want to be headed, especially coming out of the pandemic. And then for our English learner proficiency, we exceeded expectations on our district performance framework. Our growth was at the 87th percentile, which is the only blue spot in our district performance framework. Blue, when you get that overall as a district, so here's the blue spot that's exciting to see, and that is English language proficiency. So that's how our students who are learning English are actually acquiring the language and demonstrating proficiency, and that's a huge celebration for us. I realize that it is a small sample size reported on here, but their growth is at the top of their game. So we want to keep it there, and of course get more students in that high category as well in other areas. Okay, let's get myself to the next slide. So in 1.2, we have that all students should be reading at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. As you all know, 3rd grade is one of those make or break years in terms of you switch from learning to read to reading to learn. And we don't want that to keep going up and up, that, okay, 5th grade is when you actually are reading to learn, and 9th grade is when you're reading to learn. And we have kids who definitely have fallen back in the pandemic, that we are definitely trying to recover in that way. However, I did provide a report of all of our beginning to middle of the year iReady reports in each of our schools, with the notation that Loveland Classical Schools does not use iReady, therefore they are not on the report. They use DIBELS, which is another state-approved diagnostic exam. So I can look into getting data and interpretation about how Loveland Classical Schools is doing on theirs, because as you know, they factor into our overall district rating, and it's important for us to make sure that we know how our charter schools are all doing. So you can take a look at that and see the green line increasing and the red should be decreasing. And so you'll see a good comparison of beginning of the year, middle of the year for each one of our schools. At the very top of that report is an aggregate for our entire district, which you can see is also moving in the right direction. And secondly, we really took seriously this charge from the state to have all of our teachers trained in the science of reading last year, as you might recall. And instead of only doing the minimum of training only kindergarten through 3rd grade teachers in the science of reading, we actually, I would change this. We trained pre-K through 5th grade teachers in the science of reading, and I had the pleasure today of walking through some of our elementary schools where small group instruction, which is a piece that they're really drilling down into, is taking off. It's really exciting to see that the teachers and the kids know their areas of focus. They know we need to move this particular group of students who might have similar deficiencies in reading, similar strengths in reading, and they're really playing those things together to bring them to the next level. And we're beginning to see those results, which is what I was hoping would be at the end of the 2nd year of implementation. 1 year was learning about science of reading. This year's implementation of science of reading, and I would even hope to see even more of that next year. So exciting stuff there. To my next one. Pardon me, let me get to I'll just go on this one. Okay. So then in one area 1.3, all students graduating on time, a 4-year graduation rate. We had a great conversation around this. We have 4-year, that's called on-time graduation, but we also have kids who graduate in more than 4 years, and that's great. We have some programs that look to catch those kids before they just give up all the way on school. And so they chase after our kids who may be dropouts, who want to come back. We have a GED testing center at Ferguson High School, and we are really, really getting creative about getting kids to be able to graduate and have some hope around where they're going to enter their post-secondary future. So as you know, our graduation rate 5 years and strong, that keeps on increasing. Hopefully that is going to be the case again next year, just recently up from 84.8% to 87.6%. And we also saw some huge gains. Ferguson High School from 36.1 to 53%, that was a really big celebration. And improvements in our kiddos who are graduating in 5, 6, and 7 years. So we want them to graduate. We want to be able to put them out in the community, to be productive and have what they need to be able to support themselves in their life. And then we have some next steps that we're currently working on, or plan to work on in the future. We want to always continue to study the trends and gaps between our disaggregated student groups. We had a very exciting conversation at our DAC meeting I think that was just last week. And we really there's a high interest in being able to disaggregate and really slice and dice many different ways to learn about what are the patterns that we are seeing within our student groups, and what can we do to address them, and how can we train our teachers up to be able to meet those needs of our different students. Our targeted interventions for Tier 2 support will continue. This is not only just differentiation in the classroom, but this is really targeting students from our data who need to make more than 2 years worth of growth. That is definitely like a Tier 2, meaning it might be help beyond just the regular general education classroom. You may have to have some interventionists on board to be able to either push in or pull out kids for their particular need to accelerate them catching up. As you just discussed tonight, we anticipate having a new math curriculum to support excellent math instruction, and I don't want to see it just in the math curriculum and the materials. I want to be able to see the way that we teach math change, just like the way that we teach reading has changed to a very pinpointed approach that I went through as a teacher when I was teaching elementary math, through a process which allowed me to change my math pedagogy and see just the acceleration in student results from that. And so I look forward to what that could bring us as we change some of our math materials. We also are taking a look at how we can streamline how we're teaching English language arts, making sure that we have consistent and a complete and viable curriculum across all grade levels, all schools, so that if you're a 9th grader in English at this school, you are coming out with the same thing, same skill set and assessments and things that we can compare and talk about across the district as the 9th grader at a different school. As I've spoken about, we have continued support for our literacy development in the professional development world and in the implementation. The principals are studying literacy quite intensely this year, and how to evaluate it, how to give teachers feedback on their instruction. And last but not least, to continue to provide professional development and school-based opportunities that will positively impact our family engagement, which has been of discussion tonight as well, attendance rate, and on-time graduation. And those are happening in what you heard Dr. Guppels talk about, the implementation teams. Each school has chosen a focus area of one of these things. As Angie Garrity, principal of Namakwa, mentioned tonight, hers had been positive behavior, so PBIS, and they've been studying that all year and have seen just a ton of results. So we plan to continue this work and or start it. So.
If I could interrupt you with just a very quick question. What's Tier 2 support?
So you have like Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Tier 1 you could think of as like everybody gets it. It's general, the entire classroom gets it. And every single child should have access to and be delivered Tier 1, because we don't ever want to pull anybody out so they get further behind.
Sure.
Tier 2 might be where a kiddo is behind and they're getting some extra support, maybe from a small group reading group or an interventionist, to help determine if they are really going to need even more than that. Tier 3, oftentimes, while it's not exclusive of students on IEPs, many times Tier 3 is reserved for more
extraordinary needs.
Okay, thank you.
Just to extend on, so when we think about student achievement, there really is an intersectionality between student achievement and everything else that's going to be following. So when we talk, there's a high correlation between having extraordinary teachers and best-in-class employees. When we talk about retaining talent, when we talk about recruiting talent, the individuals that we put in front of our students has a very high correlation around student achievement. When we talk about students' emotional well-being, if kids have to be available to learn. So in order to teach them math and reading and writing and science and so they have to be emotionally available. And so having an attention around our students welcomed, our students comfortable, what other issues are students dealing with? Similar, it's exactly what I wrote about in my blog this month, but that has a high correlation on student achievement. The decisions you're making as a board when we adopt curriculum, and so when we look at math curriculum adoption or ELA or all of that, has a very high correlation on student achievement. So all of these pieces contribute to our trajectory towards, and we're moving in the right direction, but it is a slow, tenacious, important process upward and forward. But I want to just underscore that everything ties back to the student experience and student achievement. Our school districts exist to prepare students to be college, career, community ready. And so everything that we're going to talk about that follows in the strategic plan, it's always having kids at the center. That's our focus, that's our attention. But to get to achievement, it's not just about what's taught in the classroom, it's who's doing the teaching, it's the materials that were provided, it's all those other pieces that contribute to that.
Okay.
All right.
That's all I've got, so I'll hand it on to my colleagues.
Topic over.
All right. Thanks, Mark. So focus area 2, inclusive and supportive culture. Just going right into it. 2.1, students are engaged in rigorous and relevant educational experiences and opportunities. So 2 points there that talk about. One is the increase in dual immersion into the middle school. The second point that I would like to point out is also on the following slide is you think back 4 years ago, we really didn't have a Thompson Career Campus. And what that has done in the expansion for students and opportunities for students and growth just for those students and pathways in the last 3 years-ish since it's been open. And I'll say from that, it's a regionally recognized from some neighboring districts wondering, how it works and how we're engaging kids in that way. 2.2 is staff are culturally responsive to changing demographics of the district. Really won't dive too much into this because I think the presentation we just heard from Jennifer is really the meat behind the data and how we're using that to really impact 2.2. And just when you look at the numbers, as I mentioned in 2.1, the numbers at TCC. So when you look at the enrollment number, the accreditation, the tuition, that the students are saving by not having to pay for those college is pretty remarkable. And so that in itself, in the last year or two is a pretty huge celebration. And there's hopefully more coming there with expansions on the horizon. Desired outcome 2.3, effective two-way communication with families, students, and community. One is obviously the board engagement sessions that we're all a part of. The second one to talk about is the expansion of translation and technology. So I know Mike and Kelly are working on what does that look like besides just a person, other ways to engage different languages that are out there. And then the other piece that I'd say I'm pretty familiar with is ensure all facilities are welcoming, safe, inclusive, and meet the needs of students, staff, and community. In the last, actually just a few months, we've created the co-responder program. And it's actually the service calls, since the data we just put yesterday, are 80 service calls since January. So when I say service calls, that's not just, a teacher and or principal or counselor calling because they have someone that needs help. It's an elevated situation that is beyond, just the typical school level support. So we've had 80 different calls for service just for the co-responder unit. And those 80s have been engaged solely by the co-responder, not by the deputy. The deputy's really there for safety protections if needed, but the deputy really disengages from that response. And then the last one here is enact educational equity policy. So really, as cabinet leadership, what we're doing is looking at how us as individuals and divisions can really just incorporate it into our work. So it's working with the department and getting guidance of different things or ideas, and or what can we do to continue to educate and help everyone within the district understand and have it a part of their daily work. That's what I had from there. I believe Kelly has the next 2 slides.
We're counting how many slides everyone has.
I've been told that if I do really well, I can keep on going down the slide pieces. But so I get to talk about human talent. So our biggest piece of measurement is that we want to retain 85% of our staff. And as you can see from our outcomes, we develop different ways to be able to look at the job satisfaction. We also look at enhancing professional development. We heard it from our 2 principals who presented today, and we also heard it from our survey data about how everyone feels that they have opportunities to learn through PLCs. And if you just look at the numbers in and of itself, we have 500 plus courses, 62,000 plus hours that people are learning, and that differentiated learning time makes you feel efficacious in your job. We have also incorporated for our classified staff, we used our student interns as a way to support all the technology needs so that classified staff could also attend professional learning on their own. We've hired a lot of our interns. You witnessed some of those interns in our BoE study session, so that's a pretty powerful way for us to continue to move forward and provide opportunities for all. We've also had mentoring. So when we look at the mentoring options that are available for us with onboarding, and we've had mentoring programs available for principals and at schools, but now we've expanded that. So we could have the opportunity for all admin, prof tech to have received some sort of mentoring. The ambassador program has been really successful, so this was a really wonderful opportunity for us to expand that. So our induction has gone beyond just our principals, and we participate in a monthly APT mentoring program and induction program from several different folks, even here in cabinet, so that you can learn more about what TSD is all about. So if you look at our overall rate of 81%, I would say that that's extremely high considering when you put in COVID, and then you also saw the survey data, our climate survey data, so that's something that we could celebrate. Then if you also want to look at our 3.3, we are talking about using culturally responsive recruitment and hiring practices. So we have attended a job fair, including job fairs for administrators in color. We have sent lots of different surveys to folks to try and recruit to fill our hard to fill positions. We have analyzed all of our practices and are looking at creating some diverse hiring committees. So that's an ongoing work process for us as we continue to look at this data and figure out what is best for us moving forward. We've also had our HR department meets monthly with all of our surrounding districts and learn from them about salary and benefits and see how we compare and takes that information. We engaged in a wonderful recruit and retain activity that was done within all departments and also with all different leadership groups. And we have lots of information that we can dive into and look at and see which ones are the ones that we could participate and implement in. And then we do job comparison studies across all of our surrounding districts and see how we compare with our salaries. And we have already received several different conversations about that throughout the board information. So we're just in the initial stages of that work as we continue to move forward. Our next steps are to make sure that we, recruit and implement some of our recruit and retain strategies that we have been looking at throughout the year. And there's just more to come in this. That's it.
I have
focus area number 4 is stewardship of resources, and I will do this as much justice as I can with Gordon behind me answering all the questions. So TSD will maintain fiscal solvency through an annual balanced budget while meeting the current and future needs of district. So there's desired outcomes 4.1, which is increased alignment of resources to reflect the needs identified in strategic plan, and that's a big conversation that we continually have, and we're currently having conversations right now when we're talking about the budget. So intentionally budget planning to better align staffing with needs, counseling, special education, PK8 staffing model. So every year we really reflect on, are we meeting the needs of the district, and how can we designate staffing of what the current needs are. So when we're looking at counseling and the work that we did to have full-time counselors at the elementary school, and looking at, instead of using a ratio like 350-to-1 ratio, we look at, so how can we meet the counseling needs at the middle school, where every middle school has at least 2 counselors. And then PK8 staffing model, we've learned to reevaluate staffing model as far as what's that ratio looking like, and how can we provide support for our PK8 schools, making sure that they maintain programs similar to what other middle schools have as well, and especially at the elementary side. Targeted use of ESSER funds to increase graduation rates and close student achievement gaps. Student engagement specialists, interventionists, instructional coaches, deans of students. So there's 3 areas with ESSER funds. For ESSER 3 funds was loss of learning, and then SAL support, and then lost positions. So we're having conversations about, there's about 45 positions that are currently under ESSER, and then how much money is available going into next year, and how much of that budget will be towards staffing. So trying to provide support and really giving the principals autonomy, working with their staff to see what the needs are, and then providing support that way. 4.2 is assets are properly inventoried, maintained, and used appropriately without waste. So outperformance of budget with additional resources used for capital and staffing needs. So that's something we've done for the last 2 years, providing support, incentives, helping out our classified staff, helping out licensed staff. We're pretty proud of the work that we did for that 2.5% increase starting January. So that's extremely helpful for staff. So putting our starting salary at $44,075 has been tremendous, because that's what we're promoting right now, and just the conversation we'll have in negotiations this year. Thorough and detailed tracking of bond projects and fixed assets. Consolidation and repurposing of schools to address capacity utilization, resulting in budget efficiencies to maximize student outcomes. That's a lot in that bullet. But basically, Van Buren, intern in the TCC Stansbury is the Early Childhood Center, and Mary Blair Monroe training at Peakview Academy, looking at those resources and how we provide that support to Peakview. So desired outcome 4.3 is provide transparency and use of resources, convened and continued involvement of citizen oversight committees, the audit advisory committee, citizens mill levy override audit committee, citizens bond oversight committee. A lot of great committees there. Met and exceeded statutory financial transparency requirements. So there's an attachment there that Gordon would love to go over here shortly. And then involve multiple budget managers in budgeted process in order to identify priorities in multiple areas. So it's continued conversations of how can we do better with the resources that we have. And then district needs to master plan committees to deferred maintenance needs, safety, growth, educational enhancement. And the next steps for those 4 different areas: creation of measurement tools for budget efficiencies, archiving of data and invoices on bond projects once funds have been fully expended, and then Board of Education study sessions to study budget priorities, creation of measurement tools for budget effectiveness towards goals, and creation of building needs assessment to Board of Education by end of 22-23.
All right, so as was covered at the beginning of this session, Gordon went over the portrait of a TSD graduate, so I just wanted to share a few of the things that are going into the work right now around the portrait, just to get a little bit more specific for you on that. So as a reminder, characteristics for the portrait are collaborator, citizen, communicator, critical thinker and self-advocate. So tying into what we're doing, we are reviewing our existing TSD work habits for connection to the portrait characteristics. So that's looking at all the things that are happening at the school level, at the district level, and ensuring that what we're doing is actually truly anchored into those characteristics. And then tying into that, revising what that actually looks like then at all the levels, whether it be early childhood, elementary, middle school, high school. What does all that look like at those levels to help ensure that we're adequately tying into those characteristics as we work with kids? And then finally, we'll also be setting up some focus groups that'll be comprised of staff, students, and families to assist us in this work by reviewing what we're doing, giving us some ideas on some things that we could look at, just to help ensure that we're involving the community as much as possible to really tie everybody into that work with that. One of the things Dr. Schaefer said at the beginning, as you recall, is that we were working on a dashboard, and I am going to show you a couple of examples here. So when we're redesigning kind of the entire portal for Strive 2025 and how the information is laid out. And the biggest thing that we're really trying to do is we're trying to make this much more visually appealing, make it easier for people to see a lot of the measurables that have gone into this and the work that's going on. So when you click on the front door, so to speak, that'll be on the home page. This is kind of what it'll look like as a landing page. Actually, could you do me a favor, Lily? Go to the other one first, yeah. Okay, so this is the landing page, what it'll look like. An introduction section there. We'll have the portrait of a TSD graduate section there right underneath it. They'll kind of engage by kind of providing a summary with that work there, what that looks like. And then each of the focus areas will be detailed out afterwards. And you'll see that each one of those sections, they aren't active now, but those are all going to be clickable links that will then take you to a dedicated page for each one of those focus areas. So then, if you want to go ahead and do the other one, this is an example of what that will look like. So this is a draft of, for example, the student achievement page. There's an image that will go there, there's an introduction, you'll see a place for a strategic goal or indicators of success. We'll have a section there where we do some pull-out graphics just kind of in general around that topic, kind of focusing on some key stuff that we really want to share with the community. That's kind of an example of what that would look like there. There'll be a row, if you scroll down just a little bit more, there'll be a row of some additional data just in general that we want to pull out. That's kind of an example of how that would look like. And then each one of the desired outcomes that we discussed tonight in our district steps will then be detailed specifically here. So every one of those is a clickable, basically it's a cascade on it, and it will have the information, for example, that we shared with you tonight. But any place that we're able to link in some kind of a visual, like a measurement that we can kind of lay out, it might be a bar graph, it might be a pie chart, it could be a line graph, it might just be some kind of cute graphic or something that we do just to kind of spruce it up, to kind of really push the message forward. We'll go on there too. And then at the very bottom, we'll then have hyperlinks then that go to the other focus areas too, so that people can then kind of click through without necessarily having to go back to the beginning of the dashboard. So that's kind of the basic structure, what that looks like. That's kind of how the basic dashboard will look like. What we're going to do now is we will start taking this data that we presented to you tonight, and we'll start applying that in and getting that ready to go. As Dr. Schaefer said, we will have that all done for sure by spring break, but I am very hopeful we'll be even way earlier than that. So we'll start dumping things in and designing some visuals and getting all ready to go. And once we're done, we'll, like I said, there'll be it'll be kind of similar to the same. We'll have a front door there on the website that when they click that, this is the section it will load into. So.
Okay. Awesome. Excellent. That looks great. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. All right, it is 3 minutes to 8. We have one more topic. I want to know the pleasure of the board. Do you want to? I told Amy because you have childcare, right? And I said that's fine. I want to know what the pleasure of the board would be. Do we keep going, or do we? What do you have to have from us?
Do you need something from us?
Yes.
I see it says next steps guidance needed.
Yeah.
That jumped out at me.
So if we don't cover this tonight, we will absolutely then put it on to the February 15th board meeting as a discussion item. But this is somewhat, we just need some direction from the board. So we're at a point where we need to know which direction to move in. Otherwise, we're kind of sort of sitting in stasis. So the presentation will provide really an update on the work to date as well as a couple of options. But we don't want to move any further anymore until we get direction from the board. I will say that this is becoming more increasingly time sensitive.
Okay.
Depending on which option the board is interested in. And so, not that we're not gonna ask for a vote, you're not gonna have to take action on any of this, but if we're gonna be moving at least one of these options, will need us to give a nod in that direction so that we can continue pursuing it. Did I say it, Andrew? Okay.
Pleasure.
Can we, because we all have the presentation, can we email you individually our thoughts of what we're nodding, and then at the February 15th, Todd could incorporate that so we go
Absolutely, faster? And I would say the options in particular are somewhat complex, and I think the graphics and the information needs to really be paired with an explanation, because I think if you just look at the slides, it may not be entirely intuitive. So it may generate questions. I mean, you could probably figure out some of it. We just want to make sure that you have a complete picture, and that's why the presentation, I think, partnered with, because there's only so much you can put on a slide, right? So I think that there's going to be some information that Todd is going to present that's not necessarily contained in the slide, but would enhance your understanding of what the options are.
So, can I get sort of a feel from people? What do you want to do?
I would say go for it, just do it.
Any other thoughts on it?
Either way, I'm happy to either send in feedback or stay.
How long will it take? A full 30 minutes?
No, the presentation part I can do in 10-ish, but then just how many questions it generates.
He can present, and then you can ask questions through email if you'd like. And that
would that work? And you don't have to stay, because I already told you it would be a hard time. So go if you need to. That's no problem, because I did tell you that I thought we were stopping at 8, so I knew there was childcare involved. Is it okay if Todd shares and then we email our questions to him? Nancy?
I would just ask, so on this Thrive 2025, I'm okay with not asking anything as long as the list that I sent you.
So you asked, I forwarded the questions on to the team, and I think some have been answered, and we'll
yeah, if I can just get that,
absolutely.
Then I'm
We'll
fine.
do that as an RFI, so I'll inform the rest of the board as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I thought we would be done. Yeah. Okay, Todd.
Okay. Good.
I only have a short time.
All right, I'll just go through, I'll briefly touch on the schedule and progress, and it's kind of stuff we've seen, but it's still important, I think, to inform the overall package. And just the connection here is the retention of employees, and then just the partnerships that this is creating is quite extensive. So just to recap on the schedule, if the board recalls, actually back in April is when we first kicked this subject off on affordable housing. And we talked about what do we do? So there was a task force developed. We did some due diligence. We came to the board and said, here's what we're thinking. Here's kind of where we're at. We're at the point now where really that horizontal line is that we have some directions that we need to think about and kind of point a direction, because there's really two options. There's really three options. One, we can just continue research and figure out other pathways. There's one option from us that you'll see is we can't do something here, and then there's another one that is going to take a little more time, but it's definitely an option to review. So in the overall scheme of where we started, we're about 3/4 of the way through the process. The next quarter is really the development and implementation, which that's kind of a sliding depending on when we would start this. So just in the task force, there was a resource group, and they really dove into what areas can we look at to help with financial resources. So there's been a lot more than listed here, but the two that are highlighted, the state of Colorado and then Loving Housing Authority. So they've been, I'll say, more than fully engaged. We'll talk later all the way to actually the Attorney General will be back kind of involved in some questions and how we would actually do this. Just some task force summary of the survey we put out. So there was approximately 600, well, 584 responses. You can see that of those 584, there's about 400 yes that they would use affordable housing. So first, that was just kind of get the initial gauge of how much. And out of the two, that's taken both the yes and maybe, or taking the no out of it, and saying, okay, there's about 400 that would use. And you'll see the employee classifications, that's both licensed and classified, were the majority of who responded to the survey. The second set of survey questions was talking about, would you do a room share? That was just something that came out of the committee. Is this something that people would look at? I mean, is this even an option we should explore? Unfortunately, most people were kind of lukewarm to that. I will say, since the task force, we developed on the website Affordable Housing Resource Center. So there's now a place that anyone can go to, in district, out of district, just go to the website. I think it resides within HRs now, that you can go in, you can look at mortgage assistant, utility assistant, house share options out there. So there's so many resources out there that's actually quite confusing. Just at the different layers between state layer, county layer, city layer. So we put together a page and said, okay, here's all the layers that is out there for the general population. So we really took all that information, and the last several months have been just research and investigation. So what type, so rental versus purchase on the affordable side, how we do it, what are some options to do it, financial obligations that the district may or may not want to do, and then looking at the stakeholders and who else can be involved to help. So I'll jump right into kind of our next steps and options, and this is our, I don't want to say your jumping point, but there's a point that we're kind of at that we need to figure out which options should we really spend some real time and energy on to work out and flesh out the details. So option one, and this is where it becomes a little time sensitive, because this project is on the Summerfield site that we are under contract for the developer. So
North. It's
yes,
what?
it's part of the 92 acres that we're under contract for.
Okay.
The Summerfield site, so off of 71st, they're on County Road, which is the County Road 30, the old high school site. So we have a option in front of us here that basically the district would buy units. So that's open for how many. The developer is making the commitment to provide it at cost. So we would basically buy the materials, pay their true labor, which is all could be done under an audit, and then that would be our cost. And then you'll see in the next slide that gets us really to a place where it's affordable. So that's really option one. And it becomes pretty complex because there's different ways to fund it. There's different ways. Do you rent? Do we sell units? But it is an option that this developer is willing to go to city council and say, give us our affordable housing designation, and that will further help decrease some of the costs that you'll see here. So they're in the middle of conceptual review with the city, and so that's why if we want to go this direction, we're not committing to it. It's not saying, oh yes, we will do this, but we are saying, yeah, this is an option we want to explore. So if you look at, this is just the conceptual, so do the floor plan first. This is, whether it's an 8 unit, 12 unit, this is the same floor plan, they just stack, whether it's 2 levels or 3 levels. So there are two bedrooms, one bedroom, and one three bedroom on a level. So what you see, for example, is if an 8-plex, we were to purchase an 8-plex just at cost, and this is today, it's pretty close numbers, but I'll say it's also conceptual, just keep that in mind. If we were to do an 8-plex, it would be 2 layers of this floor plan, is about 1.7 million, and then obviously a 12-plex would be three floors of that floor plan. And then this is the room counts, so that's important just to keep a note, because depending on the type of system we could do, whether you sell just a 3-bedroom, you could do that, just sell like a condo, you could rent the 3 condo, or you could do rent by room. So there's the different options that could be, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. The first kind of option here is this provides a place. And what I mentioned or missed saying was This is really the only option that becomes 100% really underneath our control. That we, through a third party, would manage, truly control who is in and out. And when I say we would hand it over to a third party, they would do it. But you'll see in the Fair Housing Act, when we take tax credits, there's a lot of constraints on who actually can be in those residents. So that's the cost for the 8 and 12plex. If we're to buy, just say 12plex would be 2.6, you could buy 2 of them. The interesting thing is, the developer is selling this to us. He's not making, so he's saying, oh, don't go buy 10 of these, 120 units, because that takes his profit off the land. So they're making a good faith effort, just saying, we can do up to 2 to 3 12plex, and that's, fits in our development. Yeah. So just so you kind of see what we talked about and worked out with the developer. So the next piece here, if it was a purchase option, so the 1-bedroom unit would be an approximate cost of $182. 2-bedroom would be $226. 3-bedroom would be $268. So the unit price option, this is where it gets a little interesting on the different math. But if you go 80% of AMI, so the adjusted income for this area with a one person household is $65,000. So that's saying at 80%, someone would make $52,000. You take out the calculations of utilities, housing allowance at 38%. This is projected what, say, a one income family could afford would be a unit at about $193,000. So you can see that if it was one person, the 1-bedroom unit cost is approximately $182. So it's in the range at 80% AMI that they could purchase that. And that really scales down to the 2 household members, 3 and 4. So
AMI.
Adjusted median income.
Okay,
So it's,
okay.
So that really adjusts for 2, 3, and 4. You can see that if there's 3 household members, the max purchase price at the 80%, so people make 80% of the AMI, you'll purchase about a $270,000 unit. So meaning that there are 3 people making different incomes. That's about what they could afford, which falls pretty close to the 3-bedroom unit that's proposed. So that's an option. That was looking at how we can hit the 80% if we just went down the purchase. And there's a whole nother probably study session just on how you do that, because there's different things on equity and who keeps equity and how that's transferred long term. We won't go into that because I think that's what we'll really dive into if this is one of the options for next time. So the rental option, this is just taking the rental per unit. So this is going down to 70% AMI, so those making 70%. And what would the rental per unit be? So you can see the 1-bedroom, the proposed rent would be about $1,200, 2-bedroom, $1,450, 3-bedroom, $1,600. So this is assuming that we owned. Basically, a third party like a Loveland Housing Authority would come in, and they would be the property manager. I mean, they would really manage the property. We would say, here's our constraints. You go manage it, and then we kind of step away from that. A couple of pieces of this is it's an asset the district owns. You'll see how we would do that is what we would have to research next. But it's a district-owned asset. I mean, if we sell it, we get the money back. It's like a developer, the rent comes in, you start paying down whatever option or finance option that would be. If there's an option to do cash, it could be cash. Is it similar to, there's a small district in the mountains that has done this, and they did like a COP, or basically a mortgage for this, and then they're just paying that off with the monthly rent because it's full. So that's option 1. Keep that in mind. That's a lot of, a lot of possibility, but different ways that we can look at doing it. And when we think about next steps here, it would be, how do you fund it? That would be one piece to look into. What are the different constraints within buying and rental? Option 2, it has a larger community impact. So it is looking at basically developing at 6 acres like Thompson Valley. I put process there because it is so complicated. it's hard. I mean, we want to do what's right. We want to provide this. Everyone in the community does. The challenge with affordable housing is there are so many constraints put on different tax dollars that are out there. So, for example, about 80% of this total development could be funded by, so we're talking $20 million, could be funded by tax credits through the Department of Housing, CHAFA. So there's still a small gap that we have to figure out. The challenging part is when you do that, the Fair Housing Act comes into play, and then we lose most of the ability to control who uses it, so it's almost community. I will say the exciting thing is working with Jeff with the Housing Authority. We met with the director of P3 who kind of runs over Department of Housing at the state, so it's kind of layer above. We asked, well, what if we did a lottery, so we're not picking, and I say we, kind of the third party, and there's now contract language, it's not contract signed, but what if we framed it like this, all the way to the Attorney General actually in the last week to say, this is what we're trying to do. The challenging part is these rules have been in place because people have, they've done some not good things with the money that they've been given. Yeah, so the money's there, and this is all we're trying to do is provide housing for our employees. The exciting thing is actually just today Jeff got back and said, this is actually looking pretty good. We've got our attorney, their attorney, with the Attorney General looking at some different ways to work within the Affordable Housing Act, but be more specific to us. So there is possibility there. The challenge with this is this takes time, because really the next step of this is we need a commitment first that we could do that. And it might be the solution I think they were coming to is it's TSD employees in general. It could be other government employees gets the preference. So that's kind of the language we're working at to say, okay, this is how they're thinking about it. So anyway, that's a work in progress regardless. I think we'll keep working down that. But this is something that takes years to develop. By the time you apply for tax credits, we can't even apply till next year. By the time you design, anyway, this is a years out solution. I mean, that's how these are done, though. It does take time, but that is the other option that's out there. So that's where we are. There's a lot, and it's all spinning up here, but really option one is we buy, build, rent, or sell. Or option two is we develop through tax credits. Takes them that time and still do research, but see what that takes. There's an investment each way. The investment on option one is a little more, but we get the benefit. Option two is it's more impactful for the community. It's just that it takes more time to develop, and we don't know. It's still a competitive process to get the grants. So anyway, our hope is to say, okay, what is the guidance in our thoughts of a direction? Because what we don't want to do, to be fair, is there's a developer that's putting good faith effort to try to help this problem, and we don't want to get in front of city council and start this road without, the board says, this doesn't feel quite right, let's not go that way, let's go this way. So anyway.
So we could, if we did the one north, keep it just to Thompson, so Poudre schools couldn't sneak in. It could still just be ours.
It'd be 100% ours, yes.
Okay, so we have to think about our questions.
I'll also remind the board that we are not at any point making any commitments on this or voting on this or saying we're going to do this. We're just looking for a nudge in one of these directions to continue gathering additional information.
But it sounds like, we can kind of do both, right? If one is now and the other one is years in the future.
Absolutely.
That's what my mind was going to.
And the land, the Thompson Valley land, we own. It's just sitting there. We're not going to lose it.
The prairie dogs live there.
Yeah. Right. So I'm not saying that you should be actively pursuing both, but I feel like if you do option one, if we look at that, and then option two doesn't
open.
Absolutely.
Go away, it's still there, right?
That's right.
Well, sorry, there's a little.
Or is that not true?
There's a challenge there because we need to actively pursue it to do it someday. So we need to actively pursue it now to make it happen. If we don't actively pursue it now, we could sit on it for another 2-3 years. Then it's just going to be another 5-6 years down the road. So
still would have to just start over again, probably.
Yes. So we have traction behind it, but there is no defined outcome with that either, because it's grant funded and tax credit funded, all those other pieces that bring in the housing. I guess more of the direction is, do we want to look at, I guess the bigger one is, because that can keep going regardless. I mean, we're not committing that.
Right.
On the other piece, it's the funding commitment. I mean, is that something we want to?
Isn't there a best grant?
Originally, there's not.
So, my nod. So when this was first brought, the idea was this was all about research. Is this something we even want to pursue? And so for me, I've been reading and listening, and each time you present, and I honestly am at a place where, as much as I try to get comfortable with this concept, I appreciate what it's about. I don't think this is a direction that I would support. I would rather, if we're going to spend almost $2.7 million, I would rather try to figure out a creative way to improve the salary schedules, because I think employees need the money. They're pretty clear they don't want to own. I mean, they don't want to rent, they want to own. That's pretty much the American being independent. And so I appreciate I know your team has worked so hard on this, but I'm at the place in my decision tree. To me, this just doesn't make financial sense. It's not our wheelhouse, it's not our core purpose. That's where I'm at, so.
I've been contacted by a lot of staff who have questions, right? I mean, they're interested in knowing of all of the possibilities. Will it be owning? Will it be renting? But with that said, it's large groups of people, of staff, who are looking for more information on this. And so I do know that there is a staff. This isn't a single solution to making this the best place to ever work and to stay forever. It is one piece of a puzzle, and we know that it is a reason that we have lost good people, and that there are people who probably never even look at us because I just can't afford to live in Colorado anymore, so there are people who don't work here. We know those things to be true, and the people who are contacting me are people who may have to make those choices to leave our community if we don't figure that out. And these are long-term amazing employees, and they're talking to me for groups of people because they're concerned about it. So while I understand that it's not in our wheelhouse, I think we took it on initially because we've been hearing that too many times to ignore it and to go, gosh, well, that's a real problem I wish someone else would solve. I think that there isn't a single solution. It's like, awesome, easy, great, why didn't we do this earlier? That would be awesome, wouldn't it, Todd? But I don't look at either one of these solutions and go, there's a reason that I'm concerned about it. I'm curious. I've got a million questions, right? In the little time that we have, I have a lot of questions. But I think they're both still viable solutions. I just looked back on the data, like what they're telling us. Most people who responded said they'd rather own than rent. I think that feels like something that we should keep in the forefront of our mind of what decision we make. I love the idea of doing the one where it almost entirely gets paid for by tax credits. That sounds awesome, but I don't think that we have the luxury of waiting that long. I don't think we do. I know of people who are probably going to leave the state before we figure this out, if it's going to take that long. This is real for people. And this isn't real. We're not trying to solve this because we're just so kind and caring and
loving and I want to take care of everyone in-house. The mom in me, that's true, but this is a thing that other employers and state leaders have been working on for many, many years. We're actually behind in this. There are other places that have been talking about it longer than we have, albeit we're progressive in education. But there are a lot of other industries that have had to solve this because they started to crumble because they didn't get ahead of it. And those are conversations I've been part of for a long time. And so I don't want to lose sight of that, because I think that if we were to walk away from this conversation and to not do this because it's too big and outside of our wheelhouse, I think that it would be considerable, the impact that it would have on us. So I think you have done a commendable job of navigating some tough territory and taking your skills and figuring out how to translate them into this different but similar place. And I do like both solutions for different reasons. And so thank you for coming up with two viable solutions that both require some real connections and asking good questions and being creative. That's amazing. So thank you. I do think most people who want to own a house, not necessarily like what feels more like an apartment. That's another thing that's on my mind, but I don't think that that's a deal breaker at all.
I was just gonna see if anybody else had any comments.
I think I'm fairly close to having a preference, but I'm very confused by information on the option 1 slide. So can you take a look at that? The statement at the top. The developer builds on 96 acres, TSD owned. So who owns the 96 acres?
Well, currently we own it, so
Well, I
technically.
know that, so what's the plan?
So the plan is we'll close on it, they will own it. The difference is we actually would then own a small chunk of it because we would buy the lot and where the house is.
From the developer?
From the developer, yeah.
Okay. That's not what that says to me, so thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have a preference.
Okay.
I like option 1.
Pam, what are your thoughts?
I'm trying to get my head wrapped around the owning piece of this, because a lot of people say they prefer to own. But once they, let's say, buy it, then I just feel like,
Can they stay forever?
that's it, yeah, they live there for 30 years and I'm just like, is that really gonna?
Does that solve our problem?
Yeah, is that gonna be helping us to recruit,
Because there's no housing available now because they've all been purchased.
Right, so I'm just like, if you have any thoughts, if I'm making
Yeah,
myself.
so if we follow, so Habitat actually showed us their model of how they operate, because they also want to do the same thing. So the goal is not to sell, have someone there for 30 years and then we're stuck. So you have 24 that are filled, that you can't rotate. So their model is once you're in, you don't get equity, for a while. The goal is to get you in to save, and you don't really gain 100% equity unless you were there for 30 years. So the goal is around the 5 to 8 years mark, I don't know in front of me, is that they would get enough, the owner would get enough equity back to then transfer that to a true single family home.
Awesome.
So it's the details we gotta work out, but that's the framework that Habitat, talk to them, that's what they use to keep kind of the rotation, keep it at a affordable price, but then allow some people, if they're there for 10 years, I think it was, they could take 20% equity to then put somewhere else. So then it does allow them for, stepping stones.
Okay, stepping stones. Yeah. Okay, that makes a little more sense to me, I think.
Yeah, and I would say that the ownership piece is very complex. To the point that even the city, there's not many cities that have a true policy in place for how that works.
That to me sounds, I know that's what people prefer, but that to me sounds like, wow.
Yeah, typically you talk to, like Jeff from the Housing Authority, he's, oh, shoot, we can figure that out. But it is, and that's the next layer that we have to figure out if that's going to do, but that's a whole nother
It seems much simpler to rent,
It is, that's typity how they are.
That's pretty basic, everybody knows how to set that up.
Todd, when I said I prefer option 1, I prefer option 1 with the rental part of it, not with the purchaser.
Right.
Alexander, question, comment?
I'm generally in favor of it. I worry about the cost of it and how we can afford it. I know, we would recoup some amount of our costs with people paying, rent or whatever, but that is a concern. But I mean, I that's not a game-ending concern, but it's a concern.
It's a decision point, and the example that we've looked at is Eagle County. That's what they've done. It just started doing this, Eagle County School District, and that's what they did. They didn't elect to take anything out of their reserves. It was a true mortgage that they're using the pro forma then to calculate their payback, and then they'll own it. It's just a different business for districts altogether, because typically districts don't run performance on how the equity and how the equity payback is and what you're amortizing, all that stuff. So it's just.
Yeah, and they said at CASB, I went to their presentation, and they said that they put their district office up as collateral, so their district building is their collateral until the actual units are built and can be their own collateral. So
Work on a school, I guess.
It's 12, it's taking care of 12 employees
Well, right.
for 2.7 million, and we have 2,300. The money, I'd rather put it in their pocket.
Yeah.
We all have an option to think about it a little
Yeah.
more, to answer additional questions,
Yeah, what
ask additional questions.
I'd propose, we can put this on to the agenda again on the 15th. Give you some time to maybe reflect on this. If you want to ask some questions and send me emails, that's fine. We're not asking for a decision tonight. We just really wanted to move it forward so you were aware. And we also have one-on-one check-ins coming in before your next board meeting. But if you have specific questions, you can forward them to either myself or Todd, and we can get them answered. And on the 15th, we'll ask for a little bit more of just an indication from the board of, again, what's your option? It's from, we don't have to do anything, to let's think about it, to we like one, we like two, we like both. So we're not predisposed to an outcome, but we just want to, this is where we're at right now. So we just really want to know where we go next.
Okay, so be thinking about questions and submit them. A reminder, I will not be at our next meeting. Don will be running the meeting. We'll have the agenda set.
We'll do the agenda set.
Yeah.
So we don't have exec session for the 15th?
We will have an exec session on the 15th. What we want to do is engage you in negotiations, just update. And so we're starting to get into there. So that we would be ready for an exec session on the 15th. It will start at 5. 5:30. We'll start it at 5. More information, but it's for negotiations.
Any other questions, comments? I know there's a couple more little items on the board, on the agenda, but we're gonna, so, meeting is adjourned.